I was sitting in the living room I designed 40 years ago, letting the complex rhythms of John Coltrane wash over me when my son-in-law walked in and snatched the remote from the coffee table. He did not ask. He did not say, "Excuse me." He simply pressed the power button and silenced a legend. Enough of this noise, he sneered, tossing the remote onto the sofa as if it were a dirty rag. In this house, we watch smart things. He switched the channel to a cable news financial pundit screaming about market volatility. My daughter stood in the doorway and said nothing. She just nodded. I did not scream. I did not fight back. I stood up, adjusted my cardigan, and quietly went upstairs. They thought I was defeated. They thought I was just a senile old man accepting his place in the corner. They were wrong. The next day when they got home from work, they found the front door locked, their digital keys disabled, and a legal notice taped to the wood that made them start pounding and screaming until their voices cracked. They forgot that before I was a retiree, I was the structural engineer who built the skyline of this city, and I know exactly how to bring a structure down. My name is Silas Mosley. I am 68 years old. For the past 2 years, I have lived as a ghost in my own home. I walk softly on the hardwood floors I laid with my own hands. I eat my meals quickly to avoid taking up space in the kitchen I designed for my late wife, Etta. To the outside world, and specifically to my son-in-law, Hunter, I am just a relic. I am the old black man who shuffles around in cardigans, fixes toasters, and lives off a modest pension. They think I am lucky to be here. They think they are doing me a favor by letting me occupy the guest room of the house that legally and morally belongs to me. I never corrected them. I never told Hunter that the pension he mocks is less than 1% of my monthly income. I never told him that the patent for the seismic isolation joint used in the new stadium bears my signature. I kept my mouth shut because I wanted to see who he really was. I wanted to see who my daughter Gabrielle had become. Yesterday I got my answer. It started as a perfect Tuesday evening. The house was empty. Hunter was at his real estate office, likely pretending to close deals he did not understand, and Gabrielle was at her marketing firm. I had the afternoon to myself. I decided to pay tribute to the past. I walked over to my audio system. It is a vintage setup, a Macintosh tube amplifier that Etta bought me for our 25th anniversary. To the untrained eye, it looks like old electronic junk with blue meters and glowing green tubes. To anyone who knows, it is a masterpiece worth more than Hunter's car. I carefully took a vinyl record from its sleeve. It was John Coltrane, A Love Supreme. This was not just music. This was a spiritual declaration. This was the sound of my history, my culture, and my heart. I lowered the needle. The first notes of the saxophone filled the room. The sound was warm and heavy like a blanket on a cold night. I sat in my leather armchair, the one Etta used to read in, and closed my eyes. For a moment, I was not the old man living in the guest room. I was Silas Mosley, the man who calculated the wind loads for the Dominion Tower. I was the man who danced with Etta in this very living room while the construction dust was still settling. The music swelled. Coltrane was speaking a language of resilience and dignity. I felt a peace I had not felt in months. I looked around the room. The afternoon sun was hitting the exposed cedar beams on the ceiling. I remembered hoisting those beams. I remembered Etta standing on a ladder holding the other end, laughing because I was worried she would fall. This house was not just wood and brick. It was a vessel for our souls. Then the front door slammed open. The vibration rattled the windows. The peace shattered instantly. Hunter walked in. He was wearing one of those slim-fit suits that are too tight in the shoulders and too short in the ankles, the kind that cost too much but look cheap. He threw his keys into the ceramic bowl on the entryway table with unnecessary force. He looked agitated. His face was flushed, likely from another day of mediocrity disguised as hustle. He walked into the living room and stopped. He looked at me. Then he looked at the turntable spinning. He looked at the glowing tubes of the amplifier with genuine disgust. "What is this racket, Silas?" he asked. He did not call me Dad. He did not call me Mr. Mosley. He called me Silas with a sharp inflection that suggested the name was a burden to pronounce. "It is John Coltrane," I said calmly. I did not lower the volume. I am watching a documentary analysis of the album on the screen while listening to the original press. "It sounds like a dying cat," Hunter said. He walked past me. He did not even look me in the eye. He reached for the remote control that was resting on the side table. He snatched it up. "Hunter, I am watching this," I said. My voice was low. "I do not shout. I learned a long time ago that the structural integrity of a man is measured by his ability to withstand pressure without cracking. Not anymore, he said. He pointed the remote at the television. The screen went black for a second. The image of the saxophone player vanished. The soulful, complex sound was cut off mid-note. In its place, the blaring, high-pitched voice of a cable news anchor filled the room. The screen was suddenly awash in red tickers and graphs. Enough of this trash, Hunter muttered, tossing the remote onto the sofa next to me. He did not hand it to me. He threw it as if he couldn't bear to hold something I had touched. In this house we watch smart things. We watch the markets. We educate ourselves. We do not sit around listening to noise from the last century. I sat there, the sudden transition from art to chaos ringing in my ears. I felt a heat rise in my chest. It was not just the rudeness, it was the erasure. He had walked into my sanctuary and declared my culture, my joy, and my history to be trash. He had imposed his hollow worldview on my space. I looked toward the doorway. Gabrielle had walked in behind him. She was taking off her coat. She had heard everything. She saw me sitting there, the remote lying next to me like a weapon used in a crime. She saw the look on Hunter's face, that smug, self-satisfied expression of a man who believes he is the king of a castle he did not build. "Gabrielle," I said. She paused. She looked at me, then she looked at Hunter. I saw the calculation in her eyes. I saw her weigh the effort of defending her father against the effort of dealing with her husband's temper. It was a calculation she had made many times in the last 2 years. "Dad, please," she said, her voice thin and tired. "Hunter has had a very long day. The market is down. He is stressed about the numbers. Just let him have the TV for a while. You can listen to your jazz on headphones, can't you?" She turned away and walked into the kitchen. She did not defend me. She did not tell him to respect the man who paid for her college, the man who walked her down the aisle, the man who signed the deed to this house over to her so she would have security. She sided with the intruder. She validated his disrespect. She called my music jazz with a lowercase j, reducing it to a nuisance that needed to be contained in headphones. I looked back at Hunter. He was already loosening his tie, staring at the screen, absorbing the panic of the financial news. He didn't even acknowledge that I was still in the room. To him, I was furniture. I was a fixture that had malfunctioned and needed to be reset. "He is stressed about the numbers," Gabrielle had said. The irony was almost funny. Hunter played at being a financier. He talked about crypto and leverage and arbitrage. But I knew the truth. I knew he couldn't calculate the load-bearing capacity of a toothpick, let alone a portfolio. I knew who actually paid the property taxes on this house last month because I saw the overdue notice in the mail and paid it quietly to avoid my daughter's embarrassment. I looked at the Macintosh amplifier. The tubes were still glowing warm and orange, a silent heartbeat in the room. I reached out and turned the volume knob all the way down. Then I switched the unit off. The orange glow faded to black. I stood up. My knees popped slightly, the only betrayal of my age. I smoothed the front of my wool cardigan. I looked at the back of Hunter's head. I could see the thinning hair he tried to comb over. I could see the tension in his neck. I picked up the remote control from the sofa. Hunter didn't flinch. I walked over to the wall switch that controlled the main overhead lights. I flipped it off. "Hey," Hunter shouted, turning around. "I can't see my papers." "The television provides plenty of light for smart things," I said. My voice was steady. It was the voice I used when I had to tell a contractor that his concrete mix was substandard and he had to tear down a wall. I turned and walked toward the stairs. "You are being childish," Silas Hunter called out after me. "Go take a nap." I did not respond. I climbed the stairs one by one. I ran my hand along the oak banister I had sanded myself in 1982. I felt the grain of the wood. It was solid. It was real. Unlike the man sitting in my living room. I went into my bedroom and closed the door. I did not go to sleep. I sat at my small desk and pulled out my notebook. It was an old engineering field notebook filled with graph paper. I took out my fountain pen. I uncapped it. I wrote down the date. Then I wrote Incident 1, cultural disrespect, unauthorized control of utilities. Then I wrote, the tolerance period has ended. I looked at the calendar on my wall. It was the 12th of the month. I began to calculate. Not structural loads this time. I began to calculate a timeline. I thought about the deed to the house. I thought about the clause I had inserted into the trust transfer documents, the clause my former student Harrison Cole had insisted on. The behavioral compliance clause. Hunter thought he had turned off a TV show. He didn't know he had just flipped the main breaker on his entire life. The lion was awake, and he was hungry. The next morning brought a cold front, not from the weather outside, but from the stainless steel refrigerator in the kitchen I had built with my own hands. I walked into the room where Etta used to hum gospel hymns while chopping bell peppers and celery, and I felt an immediate shift in the atmosphere. The space felt sterile. The warmth was gone. Taped to the door of the refrigerator at eye level was a sheet of crisp white printer paper. It was not a note. It was not a request. It was a manifesto. The heading was printed in bold sans serif font that read, "Smart Home Community Guidelines." I stopped and adjusted my glasses. I read the document with the same scrutiny I once applied to structural blueprints for high-rise foundations. Rule number 1 stated that the television in the common area was to be turned off strictly by 8 in the evening to promote a focused environment. Rule number 2 declared that the thermostat was now locked and controlled via a mobile application to optimize energy efficiency, meaning I was no longer allowed to touch the dial on the wall even if my old bones were aching from the damp chill. But it was rule number 3 that made my blood run cold and then immediately hot with a familiar ancient anger. Rule number 3, read, "No cooking of pungent or heavy odor foods, including but not limited to stews, gumbos, or chitlins inside the main house. The ventilation system cannot handle the particulate matter. Use the outdoor grill or the ADU kitchenette." I stared at the words, pungent, heavy odor. He was talking about the smell of my history. He was talking about the roux Etta had taught Gabrielle to make the dark, rich base of a gumbo that had fed our family for generations. He was talking about the holy trinity of celery, onions, and peppers that smelled like home, like safety, like love. Hunter had reduced my culture to particulate matter that his precious smart home could not handle. He was colonizing my kitchen. He was sanitizing my life. I looked around the kitchen. The granite countertops I had installed 20 years ago seemed to glare back at me. I heard footsteps behind me. It was not Hunter. It was Gabrielle. She was dressed for work in a gray suit that looked too stiff on her. She saw me reading the paper. She saw the stiffness in my back. She did not say good morning. She walked over to the coffee maker and busied herself with a pod. "Did you see this?" I asked. My voice was calm. It was the calm of a deep ocean before a hurricane. Gabrielle sighed. She did not turn around. She kept her eyes on the coffee dripping into her travel mug. "Hunter thinks we need to set some boundaries, Dad. He has allergies. You know how the smell of the spices lingers in the drapes. It is just easier if we keep things neutral." "Neutral," I repeated. "You grew up on that gumbo, Gabrielle. You learned to count by chopping okra at this very island. Now you call it particulate matter. It is just a house rule, Dad," she said, finally turning to face me. Her eyes were tired. They were the eyes of a woman who had surrendered her identity to keep the peace with a man who had none. "Please do not make a scene. He is trying to refinance the house to get us a better rate, and he is stressed. Just go along with it." She grabbed her mug and walked out the back door to the garage. She left me alone with the manifesto. I did not rip it down. That would be childish. That would be what he expected. I left it there. I poured myself a cup of black coffee and sat at the island. I looked at the paper on the fridge. Refinance the house. The words echoed in my mind. He wanted to refinance a house that was already paid off. He wanted to pull equity out of my legacy. The timeline I had calculated in my notebook the night before just accelerated. 2 hours later, the invasion escalated from legislation to occupation. I was in the study reading a book on fluid dynamics when I heard the sound of a drill. It was a sharp, intrusive whine that cut through the silence of the morning. I walked out into the hallway. 2 men in blue uniforms with the logo Tech Secure on their backs were standing on ladders. One was in the living room corner. The other was in the hallway leading to the kitchen. They were drilling into the crown molding. They were drilling into the plaster I had smoothed and painted myself. "Excuse me," I said. "What are you doing?" The man in the living room looked down. He looked through me as if I were part of the wallpaper. "Just installing the upgrades, sir." "Homeowner ordered a full surveillance package." "I am the homeowner," I said. "I did not order this." The man checked his clipboard. "Work order comes from a Mr. Hunter. Says he is the primary resident. Look, Pops, we are just doing the job." I watched as they mounted a sleek white sphere in the corner of the room. It looked like a reptilian eye. A small red light blinked on. It was recording. They moved to the kitchen and installed another one facing the stove. They installed one in the hallway facing the stairs. They were turning my sanctuary into a panopticon. By noon, they were gone. The house hummed with a new, malicious energy. The red lights blinked in unison. I stood in the center of the kitchen and looked up at the camera. I felt a violation so deep it made my hands shake. This was not security. This was containment. This was a prison warden watching an inmate. Suddenly, a voice crackled from the camera speaker. It was tinny and distorted, but it was unmistakably Hunter. "Dad, I see you are standing there." The voice echoed in the empty kitchen. "I installed these for your safety. You are getting older. We worry about you leaving the stove on or falling. This way I can check in on you from the office. It is for your own good." I looked directly into the lens. I knew he was watching me on his phone or his computer screen miles away. He was probably sitting in his glass-walled office feeling powerful, feeling like he had finally brought the old man to heel. He called it safety, but I knew what it was. He was building a case. He wanted video evidence of me being forgetful. He wanted to catch me stumbling. He wanted to curate a reel of incompetence to show a judge or a doctor to prove that Silas Mosley was no longer fit to live independently. He wanted to drive me into the ADU or worse into a facility so he could have the main house to himself. I did not speak to the camera. I did not give him the satisfaction of an argument. I turned my back on the lens. I walked over to the pantry. I reached up to the top shelf where I kept the old photo albums. I pulled down a specific framed photograph. It was a black and white portrait of Etta taken on our wedding day. She was looking at the camera with a fierce, uncompromising joy. Her eyes were sharp and full of light. I walked back to the kitchen. I dragged a dining chair over to the corner where the camera was mounted. I stepped up onto the chair. My joints protested, but my resolve was steel. I looked into the lens. I saw my own reflection in the glass. I saw a man who had built bridges that withstood hurricanes. I saw a man who was done being polite. "Hey, what are you doing?" Hunter's voice barked from the speaker. His tone shifted from condescending to panicked. "Do not touch that, Silas. That is expensive equipment. Get down from there." I did not answer. I took a roll of heavy-duty duct tape from my pocket. I placed the photograph of Etta directly over the camera lens. I taped it securely on all four sides. Now when Hunter looked at his screen, he would not see a senile old man. He would see Etta Mosley. He would see the woman whose house he was desecrating. He would see the matriarch he never respected. I climbed down from the chair. I moved the chair back to the table. "Silas, take that down immediately." Hunter screamed. The audio was distorting with his volume. "You are damaging my property. I am calling Gabrielle. You are acting like a lunatic." I walked into the living room. I did the same thing to the camera there. I taped a picture of the two of us, Etta and me, standing in front of the framed structure of this house in 1980. I blocked his view with the evidence of my ownership. Hunter was still screaming through the speakers. "I can hear you walking around. This is ridiculous. I am coming home and we are going to have a serious conversation about your living arrangements. You are proving my point, Silas. You are unstable." I walked to the hallway closet where the main network hub was located. I opened the door. I saw the blinking lights of the modem and the high-speed router, the nervous system of his smart home. The brain that controlled the thermostat, the locks, the cameras, the streaming services he loved so much. I reached out my hand. My fingers wrapped around the main power cord. "Stop," Hunter yelled. The voice came from the hallway camera behind me. "Do not you dare." I pulled the plug. The hum stopped. The red lights on the cameras died. The voice cut off instantly. The silence that rushed back into the house was heavy and beautiful. It was the silence of a structure that had been relieved of a parasitic load. I stood there in the quiet hallway holding the plug in my hand. I felt a surge of adrenaline. I had just declared war. I knew he would come home furious. I knew he would come home with threats and bluster. But he had made a fatal error in his calculations. He assumed that because I was old, I was helpless. He assumed that because I was quiet, I was weak. I walked to the kitchen. I opened the refrigerator. I looked at the manifesto again. No heavy odors. I took out a bag of onions, a stalk of celery, and 3 green bell peppers. I took out a bag of flour and a jar of oil. I reached for my heavy cast-iron Dutch oven, the one that held heat like a memory. I placed it on the stove. I was going to make a roux. I was going to make it dark and rich, the color of the Mississippi River bottom. I was going to fill this house with the smell of gumbo until the scent soaked into the drywall and the insulation. I was going to cook until the house smelled like Etta again. Let him come home. Let him smell the history he tried to ban. Let him see that the cameras were blind and the network was dead. I was not going into the ADU. I was not going into a home. I was digging in. I turned on the burner and watched the blue flame flicker to life. The heat rose against my face. It felt like armor. I began to chop the onions, and the rhythmic sound of the knife against the wooden cutting board was the only sound in the house. It sounded like a drum beat. It sounded like a countdown. He wanted a smart home. I was about to teach him that wisdom is different from intelligence, and respect is the only currency that matters in the house of Silas Mosley. 2 days after the incident with the Wi-Fi and the gumbo, the house was vibrating with a frantic nervous energy that usually preceded a disaster. Hunter was running through the hallway shouting into his phone while a team of caterers set up trays of hors d'oeuvres in the dining room. He had hired a cleaning crew that morning to scrub the floors I had already cleaned, and they had sprayed enough lemon-scented chemical cleaner to make my eyes water. He was hosting a dinner party for his firm's senior partners. This was his big play. He needed to impress them to secure a promotion, or perhaps to cover up the fact that his sales numbers were in freefall. At 5:00, Hunter banged on my bedroom door. He did not wait for an invitation. He pushed the door open and stood there adjusting his silk tie. He looked me up and down with a sneer that was becoming his default expression. "Silas, listen to me very carefully," he said. "Tonight is important. My boss, Mr. Harrington, is coming. These people are sophisticated. They do not need to see a senile old man wandering around in his pajamas looking for his pills. You are to stay in this room. Do not come down for water. Do not come down for food. I have left a plate of sandwiches on the dresser. Eat them and go to sleep. If you have to use the bathroom, make sure you are quiet. I do not want to hear flushing while I am closing a deal." I looked at the plate. 2 dry ham sandwiches on white bread wrapped in plastic. It was the kind of meal you give to a prisoner in solitary confinement. "I am not an invalid. Hunter," I said quietly, "I am the owner of this house." "Not tonight, you are not," Hunter snapped. "Tonight, you are a liability. Just stay out of sight. Do not embarrass me. Do not make me regret letting you live here." He turned and slammed the door. I heard the lock click. He had locked me in from the outside. He had actually turned the key on the privacy lock to keep his father-in-law contained like an unruly dog. I sat on the edge of my bed. I looked at the sandwiches, then I looked at the closet. Hunter thought he could erase me. He thought he could hide the foundation of this house while showing off the facade. He did not understand that a structure without a foundation always collapses. I stood up and walked to the closet. I pushed aside the cardigans and the flannel shirts Hunter despised. In the back, inside a garment bag that smelled of cedar and lavender, hung my favorite suit. It was a charcoal gray, 3-piece bespoke suit cut on Savile Row in London 30 years ago. I had worn it to receive the Structural Engineering Award for the State Capitol Dome. I had worn it to Etta's funeral because she always said I looked like a king in it. I took it out. I dressed slowly. I put on the crisp white shirt with the French cuffs. I fastened the gold cufflinks Etta had given me. I pulled on the trousers, which still fit perfectly because discipline does not age. I buttoned the vest. I tied the silk tie in a perfect Windsor knot. I put on the jacket. I looked in the mirror. The old man in the cardigan was gone. In his place stood Silas Mosley. I walked to the door. I tested the handle. Locked. Hunter was thorough, but he was not an engineer. The privacy lock on these interior doors was a simple pin mechanism. I reached into my pocket for my fountain pen. I unscrewed the cap. I inserted the tip into the emergency release hole on the rosette. A small click echoed in the silence. The handle turned. I opened the door. The sound of laughter and clinking glass drifted up from the living room. They were already celebrating. I could hear Hunter's voice loud and performative, dominating the conversation. I walked to the top of the stairs. I paused. I listened. "This house has such great bones," Hunter was saying. "We have done so much work to modernize it. You know how it is buying these old places? You have to strip out the rot to find the value." I gripped the banister. Strip out the rot. That was me. I was the rot. I descended the stairs. I did not rush. I walked with the rhythm of a man who has nothing to prove and everything to protect. My leather dress shoes made a solid, authoritative sound on the oak steps. 1, 2, 3. The conversation in the living room faltered as I came into view. One by one, the guests turned to look. They saw a man in an impeccable suit descending from the shadows with the grace of a patriarch. They saw the silver hair. They saw the posture. Hunter's back was to the stairs. He noticed the silence of his guests and turned around. His face went pale. His mouth opened, but no sound came out. He looked like he had seen a ghost. In a way, he had. Gabrielle was standing by the fireplace holding a glass of white wine. She dropped her hand to her side. Her eyes widened. She looked terrified. I reached the bottom of the stairs. I walked straight into the center of the room. I did not look at Hunter. I looked at the gray-haired man standing in the center of the circle. He was holding a glass of red wine that had been poured too full. "Good evening," I said. My voice was deep and resonant. "I apologize for the interruption. I thought I heard a discussion about the architecture of the house." The gray-haired man smiled. He seemed relieved to see someone with gravitas. "I am Charles Harrington," he said, extending his hand. "And you must be." "I am Silas," I said, taking his hand. His grip was firm. "I am the father-in-law, and the original builder." Hunter rushed forward. He tried to insert himself between us. "Dad, what are you doing here?" he hissed through a fake smile. "I thought you were resting. You know you get confused in the evenings." I sidestepped him smoothly. "I am quite lucid, Hunter," I said. I noticed Mr. Harrington's glass. I looked at the bottle on the table. It was a decent Cabernet, but it had not been decanted. It was being served too warm. "Allow me," I said. I picked up a decanter from the sideboard. I took the bottle. With a steady hand, I poured the wine, letting it aerate against the glass. I swirled it gently. I poured a fresh glass for Mr. Harrington. The amount was perfect, right to the widest part of the bowl. I handed it to him. "You will find this opens up the tannins," I said. Mr. Harrington took a sip. He raised his eyebrows. "Much better," he said. "You have a touch, Silas." I learned from the best, I said. "My wife and I spent a month in Bordeaux after I finished the Meridian Bridge project." Hunter laughed, a nervous, high-pitched sound. "Oh, Dad loves to tell stories. He fixes things around the house mostly. He likes to tinker." Mr. Harrington ignored him. He was looking at the exposed beams on the ceiling. "We were just admiring the design," he said. "Hunter was telling us it is a classic Mediterranean layout, very open concept for its time." I took a sip of my own water glass. I turned to look at the ceiling. I looked at the heavy timber trusses I had calculated to withstand a Category 4 hurricane. "Mediterranean," I repeated. "That is an interesting interpretation." Hunter's eyes were bulging. He was making a cutting motion across his throat, trying to signal me to stop. "Dad, let's not bore everyone with technicalities," he said. "Why do not you go back upstairs and watch your shows?" I smiled. It was a cold smile. "Actually, Hunter, this is not Mediterranean," I said, turning back to Mr. Harrington. "This is a modified colonial revival structure with significant mid-century structural adaptations." I walked over to the main wall. I placed my hand on the plaster. "Hunter tells people these are just aesthetic columns," I said. "But if you look at the span of the room, you will realize that wood framing could not support the second-floor load without sagging over 40 years. I tapped the wall. It made a solid metallic thud. "Not wood. These are concealed steel I-beams," I said. "Specification I-300. I integrated them into the frame in 1982 because I wanted an open floor plan before open floor plans were trendy. I drew the blueprints on my drafting table in the garage. I supervised the welding myself." Mr. Harrington looked from the wall to me. His expression shifted from polite interest to genuine respect. "You used steel I-beams in a residential build in the 80s, he asked. "That is over-engineering. It is lasting engineering," I corrected. "I built this house to survive anything, Mr. Harrington. Storms, floods, termites, even the slow decay of neglect." Hunter looked like he was going to vomit. He tried to laugh it off. "Well, sure, steel wood, whatever. It is the finishes that matter, right? The granite, the smart lighting. The finishes are the skin," I said softly. "The structure is the soul. You can change the lights, Hunter. You can paint the walls gray. But you cannot change the bones of this house without bringing the whole thing down on your head." Mr. Harrington looked at Hunter, then back at me. He seemed to be measuring us. He saw a young man in a cheap suit talking about surface value, and he saw an old man in a bespoke suit talking about structural integrity. "You were an engineer," Mr. Harrington asked me. "I was the lead structural engineer for the city for 20 years, I said. "The Dominion Tower, the West Side Stadium, the bridge you drove over to get here. Those are mine." Mr. Harrington set his glass down. "You are Silas Mosley?" he asked. "The Silas Mosley who solved the sinking foundation problem at the waterfront complex?" I nodded. "That was a tricky one. Hydrostatic pressure." "My father talked about you," Mr. Harrington said. "He was a developer. He said you were the only man in the city who could tell concrete what to do." "I thought you retired years ago." "I did," I said. But steel does not retire, Mr. Harrington. It just waits for the load. The room was silent. The other guests were looking at me with awe. Hunter was shrinking. He was physically shrinking into the corner. He had spent the last hour bragging about his house, his renovation, his vision. And in 5 minutes I had revealed that he was living inside my masterpiece. I had revealed that he was a tenant in a temple he did not understand. Gabrielle walked over. She looked pale. "Dad, maybe you should sit down," she said. "I am fine, Gabrielle," I said. "I was just heading out. I have a late dinner reservation." I did not have a reservation. I was going to drive to a diner and eat a burger in peace. But they did not need to know that. I turned to Mr. Harrington. "It was a pleasure meeting you, sir. Enjoy the house. It is solid. For now." I walked toward the front door. I grabbed my coat. I did not look back at Hunter. I did not need to. I could feel his humiliation radiating off him like heat from a fire. He had tried to lock me in a room with a ham sandwich. Instead, I had walked out and stolen his stage. As I opened the front door, I heard Mr. Harrington voice behind me. "Hunter," he said, and his tone had changed. It was cold. It was professional. "Why did you not tell me your father-in-law was Silas Mosley? That is a connection worth more than this entire portfolio you are trying to sell me." I closed the door on Hunter's stammering reply. I walked out into the cool night air. I took a deep breath. It smelled of rain and victory. I walked to my old sedan parked in the driveway. I got in and started the engine. My hands were steady on the wheel. I had fired the first shot. I had established my value. But I knew Hunter. I knew his ego. He would not take this lying down. He would retaliate. He would try to hurt me where he thought I was vulnerable. He would go after my space. He would try to push me out physically since he could not push me out intellectually. I backed out of the driveway. I looked up at the house. The lights were warm and inviting. It looked like a happy home, but I knew the truth. The foundation was strong, but the occupants were rotting, and I was the only one who knew how to fumigate. I drove toward the diner, planning my next move. I needed to secure the perimeter. I needed to talk to Harrison Cole, and I needed to prepare for the inevitable counterattack. Hunter was going to come for the basement. I knew it, and when he did, he was going to find out that some walls are load-bearing for a reason. The air in the living room was thick with the kind of silence that usually follows a car crash. Hunter was pacing back and forth in front of the fireplace, his footsteps muffled by the rug I had bought in Morocco 20 years ago. He was holding a rolled-up tube of paper in his hand, slapping it rhythmically against his thigh. It sounded like a metronome counting down to an explosion. Gabrielle was sitting on the sofa staring into her wine glass, which was empty, but she kept swirling it as if hoping a solution would materialize from the residue. I was sitting in my armchair, the leather cool against my back. I had just returned from my late dinner at the diner where I had eaten a cheeseburger and read 3 chapters of a book on medieval castle fortifications. I felt fortified. I felt ready. Hunter stopped pacing. He turned to face me. His face was flushed, not with embarrassment anymore, but with a cold, calculated anger. He looked like a man who had decided to burn down the village to save his pride. So Hunter said, his voice tight, "You had your fun tonight, Silas. You showed off. You made me look like an idiot in front of my boss. I hope it was worth it." "I did not make you look like anything, Hunter," I said, calm as a lake. "I simply clarified the structural reality of this house. If the truth makes you look foolish, that is a problem with your foundation, not mine." Hunter laughed. It was a sharp, barking sound. Foundation. Right. You love that word, don't you? Well, let's talk about foundations, Silas. Let's talk about who actually lives here and who is just a guest. He unrolled the paper in his hand. He snapped it open and laid it on the coffee table, smoothing out the corners with aggressive swipes of his hand. It was a blueprint. Not a professional blueprint drawn by an architect, but a crude rendering likely made with some free online software. It showed the floor plan of my basement. The basement was sacred ground. It was not just a storage space. It was Edda's sanctuary. When she got sick, when the cancer started to take her mobility, we moved her down there because it was cooler in the summer and quieter. I had set up her painting studio in the corner with the best light. I had built shelves for her collection of jazz records and first edition books. After she passed, I had left it exactly as it was. Her easel still stood there with her last unfinished canvas. Her smell still lingered faint like dried lavender. It was a shrine. It was the heart of the house. Hunter pointed a finger at the drawing. "We are making some changes," he announced. "Gabrielle and I have been talking. We need more space. This house is big, but the layout is dated. We need a modern entertainment space, a home gym, a media room." I looked at the drawing. He had drawn heavy black lines over Edda's studio. He had drawn a treadmill where her easel stood. He had drawn a massive sectional sofa where her reading chair was. "You want to renovate the basement?" I asked. My voice was low. "Not renovate," Hunter corrected. "Repurpose. We are gutting it. We are tearing out those old shelves. We are putting in rubber flooring for the gym. We are mounting a 90-inch screen on the north wall. It is going to be a man cave, a place where I can relax." I looked at Gabrielle. She was still staring at her glass. She knew what that room meant. She knew I went down there every Sunday morning to sit in silence and talk to her mother. "Gabrielle," I said, "do you agree with this?" She looked up. Her eyes were wet. She looked terrified of Hunter and ashamed of herself. "It is just space, Dad," she whispered. "We are not using it. It is just gathering dust. Hunter needs a place to decompress. His job is very stressful." "Stressful," I repeated. "You think his job is stressful. Try building a bridge across a fault line, Gabrielle. Try watching your wife fade away in the room you built for her." "That is enough," Hunter interrupted. He slammed his hand on the table. "We are not here to debate feelings. We are here to talk logistics. Because here is the thing, Silas. If we turn the basement into a gym, we need to move some things around. And by things, I mean you." He pulled out another sheet of paper. This one was a printout of a small structure. It looked like a shed. It was a shed. It was the old garden shed in the backyard where I used to keep my lawnmower and my bags of fertilizer. It was a 12 by 12 wooden box with a single window and a corrugated metal roof. "We are converting the shed," Hunter said. "We are turning it into an ADU, an accessory dwelling unit. It is all the rage in California. Very chic, minimalist. We are going to insulate it, run a power line, maybe put in a compost toilet. It will be your own private cottage." I stared at the picture. A compost toilet. He wanted to move me from the master suite I had designed to a shed where I would have to use a bucket. "You want me to live in the garden shed?" I asked. "It is an ADU," Hunter corrected again. "Do not be dramatic. It will be cozy. You will have your own space. You can listen to your jazz as loud as you want out there and no one will hear it. It is a win-win." Gabrielle nodded quickly. "Yes, Dad, think about it. You love the garden. You will be right there next to your tomatoes. And we—" She hesitated. "We need privacy, Dad. We are a young couple. We want to start a family soon. It is hard to be romantic when your father is down the hall. Start a family, I thought. You want to bring a child into a house built on disrespect. You want to raise a child to treat his grandfather like livestock. So that is the plan," Hunter said, rolling up the blueprints. "Contractors are coming next week to start on the shed. Once you are moved out, we start on the basement. It is happening, Silas. This is not a request. It is a notification." I stood up. I felt a cold rage spreading through my veins like ice water. I walked over to the coffee table. I picked up the blueprint of the basement. I looked at the black lines crossing out Edda's life. I looked at Hunter. He was smirking. He thought he had won. He thought he had cornered the old lion. "You are going to gut the basement?" I asked. "Down to the studs," Hunter said. "Total refresh." I looked at Gabrielle. "Your mother died in that room, Gabrielle," I said. My voice was not loud, but it filled the room. It bounced off the steel beams hidden in the walls. I held her hand in that room while she took her last breath. I painted those walls the color of the morning sky because she asked me to. And now you want to put a treadmill on her ghost. You want to sweat and grunt and watch football in the place where your mother's soul departed. Gabrielle flinched. A tear rolled down her cheek. "Dad, please do not put it like that." "How should I put it?" I asked. "Should I put it in marketing terms? Are we rebranding her death? Are we optimizing her memory?" Hunter stepped between us. He got right in my face. He smelled of stale wine and cheap cologne. "Stop it, Silas," he hissed. "Stop guilt-tripping her. Edda is dead. She is gone. She is dust in a jar. She does not care about the basement. She does not care about the paint. People die, Silas. It happens. Get over it. The living are what matter. The people paying the bills are what matter. And right now, that is me. So you are going to the shed, and the basement is becoming a gym. End of discussion. He poked me in the chest, a hard jab with his index finger. I looked down at his finger. Then I looked up at his eyes. They were empty. There was no soul in there. Just appetite, just a hunger for things he did not earn and could not build. You are right, Hunter, I said. I stepped back. I smoothed my vest. Etta is gone. Exactly, Hunter said, stepping back, looking satisfied. Finally, you are being rational. I turned to Gabrielle. She was weeping silently now. She knew. Somewhere deep inside, under the layers of submission and fear, she knew what they were doing was a desecration, but she did not speak. She did not stop him. I will start packing, I said. Hunter's eyes lit up. Great. That is great, Silas. I knew you would see reason. The shed will be ready in a month. Until then, just stay out of the way, okay? I walked toward the stairs. I did not look back. I climbed the steps to my room. I closed the door. I locked it. I went to my desk. I opened my notebook. I wrote down the date. Then I wrote Incident 4. Attempted displacement. Desecration of memorial site. Physical intimidation. Then I wrote, the Trojan horse strategy is active. I sat there in the dark. I thought about the basement. I thought about the load-bearing wall that ran right down the center of the room, the one Hunter had drawn a big X through on his little diagram. He wanted to remove it to open up the space. I smiled. It was a grim smile in the darkness. Go ahead, Hunter, I whispered. Gut the basement. Tear down the walls. He did not know that the basement was not just a room, it was the anchor. And he did not know that I was the only one who knew where the keys to the castle were buried. I picked up my phone. I dialed a number I had not called in 2 years. Harrison, I said when the voice answered. Silas. The voice said, warm and surprised. Is everything all right? No, Harrison, I said. Everything is structural. I need to trigger the clause. But first I need you to prepare a document, a very specific document. Tell me, Harrison said. I told him. I told him everything. And when I hung up, I knew that the countdown had begun. Hunter wanted a gym. He was going to get a lesson in gravity instead. And gravity, as every engineer knows, is a harsh mistress. The morning sun filtered through the kitchen blinds, casting long striped shadows across the granite island where I sat with my black coffee. The house was quiet, but it was the silence of a battlefield between skirmishes. I knew the tactical situation was dire. 2 years ago, in a moment of paternal weakness and perhaps a touch of mortality-induced fear, I had signed the deed of this house over to Gabrielle. It was meant to be a legacy gift, a way to ensure she would never be subject to the whims of a landlord. I had retained a life estate, meaning I had the legal right to live here until my heart stopped beating. But legal rights are fragile things when you are living with a man who views you as a parasite. If I fought them openly now about the basement or the shed, Hunter would escalate. He would make the environment so toxic that my blood pressure would do his work for him. Or worse, he would find a legal loophole to declare the environment unsafe for a senior citizen. I needed to change tactics. I needed to stop being the wall that stops the wind and become the wind that erodes the mountain. Hunter walked into the kitchen. He was wearing his running gear, which looked pristine and unused. He poured a glass of filtered water and drank it while scrolling on his phone. He did not look at me. He was waiting for me to complain. He was waiting for the old man to start grumbling about the basement plan so he could crush me with his new authority. Hunter, I said. My voice was level, devoid of emotion. He lowered the phone slowly. What is it, Silas? If you are going to talk about the basement, save your breath. The contractors are already booked. I am not going to talk about the basement, I said. I set my coffee cup down. I have been thinking about what you said last night. You are right. Hunter blinked. He looked like a man who had swung a sledgehammer at a wall only to find the wall was made of paper. Excuse me, he said. You are right, I repeated. The house is crowded. You and Gabrielle need your space to start a family. And honestly, the basement is just a room. Etta is not there. I am holding on to ghosts. If you think the shed is the best solution, then I will move to the shed. Gabrielle walked in at that exact moment. She was wearing her bathrobe and her hair was wrapped in a towel. She froze. She looked from me to Hunter, waiting for the explosion. Did I hear that right? Hunter asked, a slow grin spreading across his face. Did you just agree with me? I am agreeing to the transition, I said. I will start sorting through my things today. I will need some time to box up the books and the records, but I will be out of your way as soon as the ADU is habitable. Gabrielle let out a long breath she must have been holding since the night before. "Oh, Dad," she said, rushing over to hug me. "Thank you. Thank you for being so understanding. You will see. It is going to be great. It will be like a little cottage, very private." Hunter looked victorious. He puffed out his chest. He looked like a general who had just accepted an unconditional surrender. "Well, I am glad you finally saw reason, Silas," he said. "It takes a big man to admit when he is obsolete. I mean when he is wrong." I did not flinch at the insult. I simply nodded. "I am going to the hardware store to get some boxes," I said. "Take your time," Hunter said. "The contractors do not start demolition until Monday." I stood up and walked out of the kitchen. I felt their relief radiating behind me. They thought they had won. They thought the old engineer had crumbled under the pressure. They did not understand the concept of a controlled demolition. You do not blow up a building by attacking the facade. You weaken the supports quietly and let gravity do the rest. I was not surrendering. I was simply moving my command center. That afternoon, the atmosphere in the house shifted from hostility to a manic sort of excitement. Hunter and Gabrielle were giddy. They walked around the living room with a tape measure discussing the future as if I were already gone. I sat in my armchair reading a book on thermodynamics, but my ears were tuned to their conversation. They were standing near the main load-bearing wall that separated the living room from the dining room. It was a massive wall, thick with plaster and lath hiding the steel columns I had mentioned to Mr. Harrington. "You know, babe," Hunter said, tapping the wall with his knuckles. "This whole wall makes the flow so choppy, it feels closed in. If we are doing the basement, we might as well go all the way." Gabrielle looked hesitant. "But Dad said this is structural. Remember what he told your boss." Hunter rolled his eyes. "Silas says a lot of things to make himself sound important. He just does not want us changing his precious design. Look at this. It is just wood and plaster. If we knock this down, we can have a complete open concept from the front door to the back deck. Imagine the natural light. Imagine the parties we could host." He was seducing her with a vision of a lifestyle they could not afford in a house that could not support it. "We could put a massive island right here," Hunter continued, gesturing to the space where the wall stood. "Quartz waterfall edge. It would double the value of the house instantly." Gabrielle bit her lip. "It would be beautiful," she admitted. "But are you sure it is safe?" "Babe, I work in real estate," Hunter said with unearned confidence. "I know houses. I see renovations every day. We just put in a header beam and boom, open concept. I will tell the contractor to add it to the scope of work. We do not even need a permit for interior work if we do not tell the city." I sat there and turned a page of my book. I did not look up. I did not speak. Inside my mind, I was calculating the load vectors. That wall supported the second-floor joists, which in turn supported the roof trusses. If they removed that wall without a properly calculated steel beam aimed at the foundation footings, the second floor would sag. The plaster in the master bedroom would crack within weeks. The roof line would eventually dip. It would not fall down immediately. It would be a slow, agonizing structural failure. It would cost tens of thousands of dollars to fix. It would ruin the equity he was so desperate to extract. A younger version of me would have jumped up. I would have drawn a diagram. I would have explained the physics of shear force and compression. But that man lived in a house where he was respected. The man I was today just kept reading. If Hunter wanted to destroy the asset he was trying to steal, I would not stand in his way. Never interrupt your enemy when he is making a mistake. "Do it," Gabrielle said softly. "Let us open it up," Great Hunter said, clapping his hands. "I will call the contractor. This is going to be epic." Epic indeed, I thought. I closed my book and stood up. "I am going to take a nap," I said. "Sure thing," Silas Hunter said. "Dream of your new shed." I went upstairs, but I did not nap. I waited. I waited for the sun to go down. I waited for the house to go quiet. I waited for the smart home to go to sleep. At 2 a.m, the house was silent. I slipped out of my bedroom. I did not turn on any lights. I knew the geography of this house better than I knew the lines on my own hand. I navigated the hallway by touch, my fingers trailing along the wall. I went down the stairs, avoiding the third step, which always creaked in the winter. I moved through the kitchen, past the dark eye of the camera I had blinded with Edda's photo. I opened the door to the utility closet. This was the mechanical heart of the house, the furnace, the water heater, the main breaker panel. It was a symphony of copper and steel that I had orchestrated decades ago. Hunter had complained all week about the heating bills. He had installed a smart thermostat that lowered the temperature to 60 degrees at night to save money. He did not understand that radiant heat works best with consistency, not fluctuation. The rapid cooling and heating was stressing the boiler. I took a small adjustable wrench from my pocket. I knelt in front of the hydronic circulation pump. It was a sturdy red unit, reliable as the tides. Connected to the outflow pipe was a small brass valve. It was the air bleed valve. Its job was to release trapped air from the system to keep the water flowing silently. If you tighten it, the system is sealed. If you open it fully, water sprays out. But if you loosen it just a fraction of a turn, just enough to break the seal, it allows air to be sucked into the line when the pump cycles down. Then, when the heat kicks on in the morning, that air rushes through the copper pipes. It creates a phenomenon known as water hammer. It also creates a high-pitched whistling sound as the air is forced through the radiator valves. I applied the wrench. I felt the brass yield. I turned it maybe 10 degrees. A tiny hiss of air escaped, then stopped. It was perfect. It was undetectable to the untrained eye. To a man like Hunter, who probably didn't know a boiler from a toaster, it would be a mystery. I stood up and put the wrench back in my pocket. I looked at the furnace. It was a good machine. It was about to become a very loud one. I went back upstairs. I got into bed and pulled the quilt up to my chin. I fell asleep instantly. At 6:30 in the morning, the smart thermostat triggered the morning heat cycle. The boiler fired up. The pump engaged. And the house began to scream. It started as a low gurgle in the walls, like a stomach growling. Then, as the pressure built, the air pockets hit the radiator valves. A high-pitched shriek echoed through the ductwork. It sounded like a steam train braking on a metal track. Clang, hiss, whistle, bang. The pipes rattled in the walls. The radiators sang a discordant chorus of metal torture. I heard a door slam down the hall. I heard heavy footsteps running. "What the hell is that?" Hunter screamed. I lay in bed and smiled at the ceiling. The symphony of the morning had begun. Silas Hunter shouted, banging on my door. "Silas, wake up. The house is exploding." I took my time. I put on my glasses. I put on my slippers. I opened the door. Hunter was standing in the hallway in his boxers, looking wild-eyed. The noise was deafening. It sounded like the house was tearing itself apart. "What did you do?" Hunter yelled over the noise. "I did nothing," I said calmly. "I was sleeping." "Fix it," he screamed. "You are the engineer. Fix it." I cannot hear myself think. I leaned against the door frame. I folded my arms. "I am just a guest here, Hunter," I said. "I am moving to the shed, remember? The maintenance of the main house is the responsibility of the primary resident. Perhaps you should ask your smart home app to fix it." Hunter looked at me with pure hatred. He ran past me down the stairs toward the utility closet. He had no idea what he was looking for. He would probably kick the furnace. He would probably call an emergency plumber who would charge him triple for a Sunday morning call-out. I went back into my room and closed the door. The banging of the pipes was loud, but to me it sounded like music. It was the sound of the house fighting back. It was the sound of the first crack in Hunter's facade. He wanted to control the environment. Now the environment was controlling him. And this was just the heating system. He had no idea what I had planned for the electrical grid. The emergency plumber had charged Hunter $600 to tighten a valve that I had loosened for free. Hunter was still seething about it on Tuesday evening when he cornered me in the kitchen. The house was quiet again, but the tension was thick enough to choke on. I was making tea, my movements slow and deliberate, designed to annoy him. "Silas, we need to talk finances," Hunter said, leaning against the counter. He had that look on his face, the one that meant he was about to try and sell me something I already owned. I stirred my tea. "What about them, Hunter?" "Look, this ADU project is getting expensive," he said. "Lumber prices are up, labor is crazy, and since this is going to be your private space, your little retirement villa, it is only fair that you contribute to the cost." I looked at him over the rim of my mug. "You want me to pay for the shed you are forcing me into?" "It is an investment, Silas," he said, waving his hand dismissively. "It adds value to the property. And honestly, you have been living here rent-free for 2 years. It is time to pay the piper. I need your credit card." He held out his hand palm up, expecting me to just drop my plastic into it. The audacity was breathtaking. He was not asking. He was demanding. He was shaking down an old man in his own kitchen. "I do not have that kind of liquidity." I lied. "I live on a fixed income." "Cut the crap," Silas Hunter snapped. "I saw the mail. You get statements from investment firms. I know you have a stash. Hand it over. Or maybe we stop buying groceries for the house. Maybe we turn off the heat in your room until you move out. It was a direct threat. Pay up or freeze. I sighed. I put down my mug. I reached into my back pocket and pulled out my wallet. It was old leather worn smooth by decades of use. I opened it and pulled out a card. It was a secondary card connected to an account I kept for minor expenses. It had a limit of $2,000. Enough to buy some lumber, but not enough to hurt me. Fine, I said, handing it to him. But this is all I can spare. Be careful with it. Hunter snatched the card. He looked at it like it was a gold nugget. Finally, he said, a smirk spreading across his face. You are finally learning how the world works, Silas. Nothing is free. He walked over to the kitchen table where his laptop was open. He sat down and immediately started typing. He was probably ordering the most expensive materials he could find, or maybe just buying himself something nice. He was so focused on his victory, so absorbed in the act of spending my money, that he did not notice me moving. I walked behind him, pretending to head for the sink. I paused. Is that the contractor site? I asked, leaning in slightly. Hunter shifted the screen away from me. None of your business, he muttered. Just go drink your tea. I moved to the counter, but my eyes had already done their work. I had seen the login screen. I had seen the browser tabs. But more importantly, I had seen the USB port on the side of his machine. Hunter, I said, my voice taking on a confused tone. I think the dishwasher is leaking again. Can you look? Hunter groaned. Seriously, Silas, you are useless. He stood up, leaving the laptop open. He walked over to the dishwasher. It was not leaking. I had just spilled a little water on the floor. While he was bent down muttering curses, I moved. I reached into my pocket. I pulled out a small black USB drive. It was not a storage drive. It was a keystroke logger I had configured myself. I used to test security systems for banks. I knew how to penetrate a firewall, but sometimes the physical backdoor is the easiest way in. I plugged the drive into the side of his laptop. A tiny blue light blinked once, then went dark. It was installing. It would take 10 seconds. There is no leak. Old man Hunter shouted, standing up. You probably just spilled your water. You are shaking. Look at you. I am sorry, I said. My hands are not what they used to be. I pulled the drive out just as he turned around. I palmed it and slipped it back into my pocket. The software was in. It would record every key he pressed, every password, every search term, every message. It would send a log file to my secure server every hour. Hunter sat back down at his computer. He did not notice a thing. He was too busy spending my $2,000. Go to bed, Silas, he said without looking up. I have work to do. I went upstairs. I did not go to bed. I went to my desk. I opened my iPad. I logged into my secure server. I waited. At midnight, the first log file arrived. I opened it. It was a stream of text raw data from the mind of my son-in-law. I began to read. And as I read, the picture of a greedy, ambitious young man dissolved and was replaced by something much more desperate and dangerous. I saw the search history. Online casinos, crypto trading forums, how to extend a margin call, quick cash loans, no credit check. Hunter was not just bad with money, he was drowning. He had leveraged everything he had on volatile markets and lost. He was chasing losses with more losses. Then I saw the emails. Threatening emails from loan sharks. Polite but firm emails from banks demanding payments on loans I didn't know existed. But the real horror was in a PDF document he had attached to an email sent to a shady mortgage broker at 10:45 that night. It was a loan application. A home equity line of credit application for $500,000. The collateral was this house. My house. The house Etta and I built. I scrolled down to the signature line. There it was, Gabrielle Mosley. But the signature was wrong. The loop on the G was too wide. The slant was too sharp. I knew my daughter's hand. I taught her to write. That was not her signature. Or maybe it was. Maybe she had signed it under duress. Maybe she had signed it blindly trusting her husband. Or maybe Hunter had forged it. I looked at the date on the application. Today. He was trying to pull $500,000 of equity out of the house to pay off his gambling debts. And if he defaulted, which he surely would, the bank would foreclose. They would take the house. They would evict Gabrielle. They would evict me. I sat back in my chair. The screen glowed in the dark room, illuminating my face. I felt a cold knot in my stomach. This was not just about disrespect anymore. This was not just about a gym in the basement. This was grand larceny. This was fraud. This was the destruction of my family's future. I looked at the screen again. I saw a message Hunter had sent to a user named Vegas Vic. Do not worry, Vic. The loan is processing. The old man is moving to the shed. I have full control of the property. You will get your money next week. Just hold off on the kneecaps, okay? I closed the iPad. My hands were steady now. The anger was gone, replaced by a cold, tactical clarity. Hunter was not just a nuisance. He was a threat. A criminal threat. And he had just handed me the weapon I needed to destroy him. I needed to act fast. The loan was processing. I had to stop it. But I couldn't just tell Gabrielle. She would not believe me. She would think I was spying. She would think I was the villain. I needed undeniable proof. I needed to catch him in the act. I needed to let the trap snap shut around his neck so tight he couldn't wriggle out. I picked up my notebook. I wrote Incident 6, attempted mortgage fraud, forgery, financial endangerment of the estate. Then I wrote, the trap is set. I looked out the window at the dark backyard. I could see the outline of the shed in the moonlight. He wanted me in there. He wanted me out of the way so he could loot the castle. I stood up and walked to the window. You picked the wrong house, Hunter, I whispered to the glass. And you definitely picked the wrong engineer. Tomorrow I would go to the city. I would go to the top of the Dominion Tower. I would see Harrison Cole. And we would prepare the paperwork for an eviction. Not mine. His. The Dominion Tower rises 60 stories above the pavement of the city center like a shard of obsidian piercing the sky. To most people, it is just an office building where lawyers and hedge fund managers make fortunes. To me, it is a living organism of high-tensile steel and reinforced concrete. I know every bolt in its skeleton. I know exactly how much it sways in a 40-mile-an-hour wind. I stood in the lobby on Wednesday morning wearing my Savile Row suit and holding my leather briefcase. The security guard at the desk looked up. He was a young man, probably new. He started to ask for my ID, but stopped when he saw the small brass plaque on the wall behind him. It listed the architects and engineers of record. My name was third from the top. I took the express elevator to the penthouse suite. The sensation of rising was familiar and grounding. When the doors opened, I walked into the reception area of Cole & Associates. The receptionist smiled politely but dismissively. She saw an older black man with a briefcase and assumed I was a courier, or perhaps a client from a pro bono case. "May I help you, sir?" she asked, reaching for her phone. "Tell Harrison that Professor Mosley is here," I said. She hesitated. "Mr. Cole is in a partner meeting. He is not to be disturbed. Do you have an appointment? Just tell him I said." My voice was low, but it carried the weight of the steel beams holding up the floor beneath her feet. She pressed a button. "Mr. Cole, there is a gentleman here, a Professor Mosley." She did not even finish the sentence before the heavy double doors at the end of the hall flew open. Harrison Cole strode out. He was 45 years old, wearing a $3,000 suit, and he looked like a titan. But when he saw me, his face broke into a grin that wiped away 20 years of courtroom hardening. "Professor," he boomed. He crossed the lobby in 3 strides and ignored my extended hand. He pulled me into a bear hug. It was a breach of professional decorum that made the receptionist's jaw drop. Harrison was not just a lawyer, he was my best student. He was the young man I had mentored when he was struggling with structural dynamics before he realized his mind was built for the architecture of law rather than buildings. Harrison led me into his corner office. It was a massive space with floor-to-ceiling windows overlooking the stadium I had also designed. He poured me a coffee exactly the way I liked it, black and scalding hot. "To what do I owe the honor?" "Silas," he asked, sitting on the edge of his mahogany desk. "You usually only come here when you want to criticize the city's zoning laws." I sat in the leather guest chair. I placed my briefcase on my lap. I did not smile. "I need to activate the ETA protocol," I said. Harrison's smile vanished instantly. He stood up and walked behind his desk, sitting down heavily. He clasped his hands in front of him. His eyes went dark and sharp. "The ETA protocol," he repeated. "Are you sure? Once we pull that lever, we cannot put it back." "I am sure," I said. I opened my briefcase. I took out the USB drive containing the keylogger data. I took out the photos of the ADU plans. I took out a printed copy of the loan application Hunter had forged. "Hunter is trying to refinance the house," I said. "He has forged Gabrielle's signature. He is trying to pull $500,000 of equity out of the property to pay gambling debts. And he is trying to move me into the garden shed." Harrison picked up the loan application. He scanned it with the speed of a machine. His nostrils flared. "This is fraud," he said quietly. "This is federal bank fraud, wire fraud, identity theft." He looked up at me. Does Gabrielle know? I shook my head. She is compliant, Harrison. She is terrified of him. She thinks she owns the house, so she thinks she has to do what he says to save their marriage. She does not know about the gambling. She just thinks he is stressed. Harrison leaned back. He looked out the window at the city skyline. He knew the secret. He was the one who had drafted the paperwork 3 years ago when Etta was dying. Etta had been the one with the intuition. She loved Gabrielle, but she knew our daughter was soft. She knew Gabrielle had a weakness for broken men who promised her the world. Etta had made me promise to protect the asset not just for us, but for Gabrielle's future children. When I transferred the deed 2 years ago, everyone thought it was a simple gift. Hunter thought he had won the lottery. He thought he had married into a free mansion. But Harrison and I had built a fail-safe into the foundation of the transfer. The house was not transferred to Gabrielle as a fee simple estate. It was transferred into the Etta Mosley Living Trust. Gabrielle was named as the primary beneficiary with a right of residency. I was named as the grantor with a retained life estate. But the devil was in the clauses. Harrison opened a file drawer and pulled out a thick bound document. He dusted it off. Clause 4, Section B, Harrison recited from memory. The beneficiary's right of residency is contingent upon the maintenance of the property in good order in the absence of any criminal activity conducted on the premises or involving the trust assets. He looked at me. And Clause 4, Section C, no liens, mortgages, or encumbrances may be placed on the property without the express written consent of the trustee. And who is the trustee? I asked, even though I knew the answer. You are, Silas Harrison said. You have always been the trustee. Gabrielle does not own that house. She is essentially a tenant with a very good lease. A lease that can be revoked for cause. Hunter thinks he is the king of the castle, I said. He thinks he can knock down walls. He thinks he can mortgage the roof over my head. Harrison tapped the forged loan application. This is cause Silas. This is nuclear cause. Attempting to encumber the trust asset with a fraudulent loan is grounds for immediate revocation of the beneficiary's status. We can evict them. Both of them. Today. I looked at the paperwork. I thought about Gabrielle. I thought about her cooking in the kitchen her mother loved. I thought about her fear when Hunter raised his voice. If I evicted them now, I would be saving the house, but I might lose my daughter. She would blame me. She would say I ruined her marriage. She needed to see the monster for herself. She needed to see him unmasked. Not yet, Harrison, I said. I do not want to evict them today. I want to trap him. Harrison raised an eyebrow. Explain. The loan application is submitted, but it has not been funded, I said. The bank will send an appraiser. Hunter is trying to send me away on a trip so he can walk the appraiser through the house without me interfering. He wants to show them the improvements he plans to make. Harrison nodded slowly. He sees where this is going. If we stop the loan now, he will just say it was a mistake, or he will find a shark lender who does not care about title deeds, I said. I need him to commit. I need him to sign the closing documents. I need him to accept the funds. Harrison whistled low. You want him to complete the fraud. Silas, that is dangerous. If the bank disperses the money, it creates a mess on the title. I trust you to clean up the mess, I said. You are the best lawyer in the city. But I need him in handcuffs, Harrison. I need Gabrielle to see him being led away by federal agents. That is the only way she wakes up. That is the only way she comes back to me. Harrison stood up. He walked over to the window and looked out at the Dominion Tower's sister building across the plaza. He was calculating the risk. He was a structural engineer of the law. He knew that sometimes you have to let the stress build to the breaking point to test the integrity of the system. All right, Harrison said, turning back to me. We will let the trap snap, but we need to be ready. I will draft a petition for removal of beneficiary. I will also draft a criminal referral packet for the district attorney. We will have everything ready to file the second the money hits his account. And the eviction notice, I asked. I will have the sheriff on standby, Harrison said. But Silas, you have to know something. When this beam breaks, it is going to bring the roof down. Gabrielle is going to be in the debris field. She signed the application too, or at least her name is on it. She could be implicated. I tapped the USB drive. I have his search history, Harrison. I have his emails to the forger. I can prove she did not know. I can prove he stole her identity too. I am going to save her, Harrison. Even if she hates me for it. Harrison nodded. He sat down and opened his laptop. Let us get to work, Professor. We spent the next 2 hours drafting the documents. The language was precise. It was brutal. It stripped Hunter of every pretension he had. It listed his debts, his lies, his attempts to destroy the legacy of a black woman who had worked herself to death for that home. When we were finished, Harrison printed the documents. They were heavy in my hand. They felt like a weapon. One more thing Harrison said as I stood to leave. The bank appraiser. If Hunter is trying to get a rush job, he is probably using a friend. Or bribing someone. I know I said, that is why I am not going on the trip. I am going to be watching. I left the office at noon. The sun was high and bright, reflecting off the glass towers. I felt lighter. I had the blueprints for the demolition. Now I just needed to wait for Hunter to light the fuse. I drove home. When I pulled into the driveway, I saw a contractor's truck parked in front of the house. It was a beat-up pickup with no logo. 2 men were unloading sledgehammers and a reciprocating saw. They were heading for the front door. Hunter was standing on the porch pointing at the living room window. He was not waiting for Monday. He was starting the demolition today. He was going to knock down the load-bearing wall while I was at the lawyer's office. I parked my car. I did not run. I walked. I walked with the slow, terrible momentum of a glacier. I had the documents in my briefcase, but I did not need them yet. I had something better. I had the city building code and a phone number for the chief inspector who owed me a favor from 1995. Hunter saw me coming. He smiled. It was a vicious smile. "You are just in time, Silas," he called out. "Say goodbye to the wall. We are opening this place up." I stopped at the bottom of the steps. I looked at the men with the sledgehammers. They looked like they worked for cash and did not ask questions about permits. "You do not have a permit, Hunter," I said. "It is my house," Hunter said. "I do not need permission to improve my own property." I took my phone out of my pocket. I dialed the number. "Hello, Frank," I said into the receiver. "This is Silas Mosley. Yes, I am well. Listen, I have an emergency code violation at my residence. Structural endangerment, unlicensed contractors. Yes, immediate dispatch. Thank you." I hung up. I looked at Hunter. "You might want to tell them to put the hammers down," I said. "The fines for structural modification without a permit start at $10,000 a day, and they bill the person holding the hammer." The workers looked at each other. They looked at Hunter. They lowered their tools. Hunter's face turned a color I had never seen before. It was purple like a bruised plum. He came down the steps. He got right in my face. "You old son of a bitch," he whispered. "You called the city." "I did," I said. "And now we wait." Hunter raised his hand. For a second I thought he was going to strike me right there in the front yard. But he lowered it. He knew he was being watched. He knew the neighbors were looking. "You made a big mistake, Silas," he said, his voice shaking with rage. "A very big mistake." I looked him in the eye. I saw the fear behind the anger. He needed that wall down to increase the appraisal value for the loan. He needed the loan to save his legs. "The mistake was yours, Hunter," I said. "You thought I was just an old man sitting in a chair. You forgot that I am the one who poured the concrete." We stood there on the lawn, 2 men on the edge of violence, while the sound of a siren grew louder in the distance. The war was no longer cold. It was burning hot. And the fire was just getting started. I purposefully left the house at 9 in the morning on Saturday because I knew Hunter was a creature of opportunity who mistook my absence for weakness. I told Gabrielle I was going to the library to read the morning papers and perhaps play a game of chess at the community center. I walked out the front door with my canvas tote bag and a thermos of coffee. I did not go to the library. I drove 3 blocks down the street and parked my sedan behind a thick hedge of oleander bushes where I had a clear line of sight to the entrance of my subdivision. I lowered the seat back and waited. I knew he would not use a reputable contractor because reputable contractors require permits, and permits require the signature of the owner on the deed. Hunter needed speed and anonymity. He needed men who worked for cash and did not ask questions about load-bearing walls. At 9:30, a white panel van with no markings turned onto our street. It was rusted around the wheel wells and the muffler was hanging low, scraping against the asphalt. It pulled into my driveway. 3 men jumped out. They were not wearing uniforms or safety gear. They were wearing t-shirts and jeans and carrying sledgehammers and a reciprocating saw. They looked like the kind of men you hire when you want something destroyed rather than built. Hunter came out of the front door. He was looking left and right, scanning the neighborhood for witnesses. He waved them inside quickly like he was smuggling contraband. He was not just remodeling my house, he was assaulting it. I sat in my car and watched the front door close. I looked at my watch. It would take them about 15 minutes to move the furniture and lay down drop cloths if they bothered with them at all. Then the demolition would begin. I imagined the first swing of the hammer. I imagined the steel head impacting the plaster I had smoothed 40 years ago. I imagined the shockwave traveling up the wall into the second-floor joists. I felt a phantom pain in my own ribs as if the house were an extension of my own body. I reached for my phone, but I did not call the police yet. I needed the crime to be in progress. I needed the structural violation to be undeniable. I needed Gabrielle to feel the house shaking beneath her feet so she would finally understand that her husband was not building a future but destroying the present. I waited. 10 minutes later, my phone buzzed in my hand. It was Gabrielle. I let it ring twice before answering. I wanted her to sit with the fear for a moment. "Hello, Gabrielle," I said calmly. "Dad, come home," she screamed. Her voice was high and thin, tight with panic. "The house is shaking. The whole floor is vibrating. They are hitting the wall and the china cabinet fell over. I think the ceiling is cracking." I closed my eyes. I could see the physics of it in my mind. They were attacking the main support column near the dining room. The vibrations were traveling up the stud pack and rattling the floor diaphragm of the master bedroom directly above. "Where is Hunter?" I asked. "He is downstairs yelling at them to hit it harder," she sobbed. "He says it is just stubborn lathe. Dad, it sounds like a bomb going off. Please come home." "Get out of the house, Gabrielle," I said. "Go to the backyard. Stand by the oak tree. Do not stay inside. That wall holds up the roof." "But Hunter says it is fine," she stammered. "Hunter is a fool," I said, my voice dropping an octave. "Get out of the house now." I hung up. I dialed the next number. It was a direct line to the private cell phone of Frank Miller, the chief building inspector for the city. We had worked together on the seismic retrofit of the hospital in '98. He owed me a favor, but more importantly, he hated unlicensed work with the fire of a zealot. "Frank, it is Silas," I said. "Silas, how are you?" Frank asked, his voice warm. "I have a code red," Frank, I said. "Unlicensed demolition of a primary load-bearing structure, residential occupancy. They are using sledgehammers on a shear wall without shoring. The structure is currently occupied." Frank's tone changed instantly. It became sharp and professional. "Address." I gave him the address. "I am 10 minutes away," Frank said. "I am rolling with a stop work order and a citation book. Do not let them leave." I started my car. I pulled out from behind the oleander bushes. I did not speed. I drove with the measured pace of inevitable justice. I wanted to arrive at the exact moment the system crashed down on Hunter's head. When I turned into the driveway, the scene was chaotic. Gabrielle was standing by the oak tree just as I had told her, clutching her elbows and looking at the house with terror. The sound of hammering was audible even from the street. It was a dull, rhythmic thud that sounded like a heartbeat going into cardiac arrest. I parked the car and got out. I walked over to Gabrielle. She looked at me, and her eyes were wide. "Dad," she said, "make them stop." I did not have to. A city vehicle with flashing yellow lights screeched to a halt at the curb. Frank Miller stepped out. He was a large man wearing a neon yellow safety vest and a hard hat. He looked like a tank. He carried a clipboard like a weapon. He walked past me with a nod. He walked up the front steps. He did not knock. He opened the front door and walked in. I followed him. Gabrielle trailed behind me. We walked into the living room. The air was thick with white plaster dust. It hung in the air like fog. The furniture was covered in a fine layer of grit. In the center of the room, the three men were taking turns swinging sledgehammers at the wall. They had punched a hole about 4 feet wide. I could see the jagged edges of the lathe and the twisted metal of the wire mesh. I could also see the dark gray steel of the I-beam column they had exposed. They were trying to cut around it with the saw. Sparks were flying. Hunter was standing back holding a beer, cheering them on. "Keep going, boys," he shouted. "We need this thing down by noon. Stop!" Frank bellowed. His voice was louder than the hammers. It was the voice of the law. The men froze. They lowered their hammers. The saw whined down to silence. Hunter spun around. He saw the yellow vest. He saw the hard hat. He saw me. "Who the hell are you?" Hunter demanded, stepping forward. "Get out of my house. This is private property. I am the city building inspector," Frank said, holding up his badge. "And this is a crime scene. Put the tools down, now." The workers dropped the hammers instantly. They knew the drill. They knew that if they were holding the tool, they got the fine. If they dropped it, they might just get kicked off the site. Hunter looked from Frank to me. His face went red. "You called him?" He hissed at me. "You called the city on your own family. I called the city on a structural threat," I said. Frank walked over to the hole in the wall. He shined a flashlight into the cavity. He whistled low. "You cut 2 king studs, and you are sawing into a structural steel column," Frank said. He looked at Hunter with disgust. "Do you have a permit for this?" "I do not need a permit," Hunter shouted. "It is interior renovation. It is cosmetic." "Cosmetic," Frank repeated. He pointed to the steel beam. "That beam holds up your second floor. If you cut that, the roof comes down. That is not cosmetic, son. That is catastrophic." He pulled a pad of bright orange stickers from his clipboard. He peeled one off. He slapped it onto the wall right next to the hole. "This is a stop work order," Frank announced. "No one enters this room until a structural engineer signs off on a shoring plan. And since you are doing this without a permit on a Saturday with unlicensed labor, I am issuing a citation." He started writing on a ticket. He wrote fast and hard. He ripped the top sheet off and handed it to Hunter. "That is a $10,000 fine for the violation," Frank said. "Plus $500 a day for every day the violation remains uncorrected. And I am red tagging the electrical panel because I see exposed wires." Hunter looked at the ticket. His hands were shaking. $10,000, he whispered. "This is insanity. I am not paying this." He turned to the workers. "You guys told me this was safe. You said you could do it." The foreman, a burly man with a tattoo on his neck, stepped back. "Hey man, you told us to just knock it down. You said it was not load-bearing. You said the old man did not know what he was talking about. We just did what you paid us to do." Hunter looked trapped. He looked at Gabrielle. "Babe, tell him. Tell him this is our house. Tell him to leave." Gabrielle looked at the hole in the wall. She looked at the dust covering her wedding photos on the mantel. She looked at the steel beam that her husband had tried to cut with a saw. "You almost brought the roof down," she whispered. Her voice was trembling. "Dad told you." "He told you it was steel," Hunter snarled. "Dad, Dad, Dad, that is all I hear. He is sabotaging us, Gabrielle. He wants us to fail." Frank stepped between them. "Sir, I need you to vacate the work area immediately. These men need to pack up and leave, and do not touch that wall again, or I will have the sheriff arrest you for reckless endangerment." Hunter threw the ticket on the floor. "Get out!" he screamed. "Everyone, get out!" The workers grabbed their tools and ran. They did not wait to get paid. They knew when a job had gone bad. They scurried past me, leaving white footprints on the hardwood floor. Frank looked at me. "I am sorry, Silas," he said. "I have to report this. The structural integrity is compromised. You might need to shore it up temporarily with lumber." "I have jacks in the garage," I said. "I will stabilize it." Frank nodded. He tipped his hard hat to Gabrielle and walked out. The front door closed. The house was silent again except for the sound of Hunter's heavy breathing. He was standing in the middle of the ruin he had created, covered in dust, holding a beer can that he had crushed in his hand. He looked at me. His eyes were wild. He looked like an animal that had been cornered and beaten. "You ruined everything," he said, his voice low and dangerous. "I had a plan. I was going to make this place amazing. And you just had to interfere. You just had to be the big man. You were going to destroy the house, Hunter," I said. "I saved your life, and my daughter's life." Hunter threw the beer can. It hit the wall next to my head and exploded, spraying cheap lager all over the wallpaper Etta had chosen. "I do not need you to save me," he screamed. "I need you to die. I need you to get out of my life and die so I can finally breathe." He lunged at me. It happened fast, but in my mind it moved in slow motion. I saw his weight shift. I saw his fist pull back. I saw the desperation in his eyes. He was not just angry, he was broke. He was humiliated. And he was terrified because his loan scheme depended on an appraisal that required a finished renovation. I did not fight him. I did not raise my hands. I let him come. He shoved me hard in the chest. I was 70 years old, but I was solid. I staggered back. My foot caught the edge of the drop cloth. I fell. My shoulder hit the corner of the heavy oak console table. I felt a sharp crack. Pain radiated down my arm. I lay on the floor in the dust. I did not get up. I looked up at him. Hunter stood over me, breathing hard. His hands were fists. He looked at what he had done. Gabrielle screamed. It was a sound of pure horror. She ran to me. "Dad," she cried, dropping to her knees. "Dad, are you okay?" She looked up at Hunter. "You hit him. You pushed him." "I did not mean to," Hunter stammered, stepping back. "He tripped. He just tripped." I reached up and touched my forehead. My hand came away red. I had cut my head on the table leg. The blood was bright against the white dust. I looked at Hunter. I looked him right in the eye. "Get away from me," I said. I struggled to my feet with Gabrielle's help. My shoulder was throbbing. My head was spinning. But my mind was clear. I walked to my bedroom. I went inside and locked the door. I could hear Gabrielle sobbing in the hallway. I could hear Hunter pacing, muttering to himself, trying to rewrite the narrative in his head, trying to convince himself it was an accident. I went to my desk. I opened my laptop. I pulled up the feed from the camera in the living room, the one I had blinded with Edda's photo. But I had removed the tape this morning before I left. I knew Hunter would not notice. He never looked up. He only looked at what he wanted. I rewound the footage. There it was. High-definition video. Hunter screaming, Hunter throwing the can, Hunter lunging, Hunter shoving me with both hands. It was assault. It was elder abuse. It was a felony. I saved the clip. I backed it up to the cloud. Then I picked up my phone. I did not call the police yet. I called Harrison Cole. "Harrison," I said, "we have the criminal act." "Is everyone safe?" Harrison asked, his voice tight. "I am injured," I said, "but I am safe. He assaulted me in the living room. I have it on video." "Stay in your room," Harrison said. "I am sending a private security detail. Do not engage him. We are filing the emergency protective order within the hour." I hung up. I went to the bathroom attached to my room. I cleaned the cut on my head. It was superficial, but it bled freely. It looked dramatic. Good. I looked in the mirror. I saw an old man with blood on his face and dust on his suit, but I also saw the engineer. I had tested the load limits of the system. The system had failed. The collapse had begun. Hunter wanted me out of the house. He wanted me in the shed, but he had just punched his ticket to the street. I sat on my bed and waited. I heard Hunter knocking on my door. "Silas," he whispered. "Silas, open up. We need to get our stories straight. If the police come, it was an accident, okay? You tripped. Do not ruin this. Think of Gabrielle." I did not answer. I was thinking of Gabrielle. I was thinking that the best way to save her was to remove the cancer from her life, and tonight I was the surgeon. The orange stop work order sticker plastered on the front window glowed like a radioactive warning sign in the late afternoon sun. I sat in the wingback chair in the corner of the living room watching the dust motes dance in the shaft of light that cut across the ruin of my home. The silence was heavy and thick. Gabrielle had retreated to the kitchen ostensibly to make tea, but really to hide from the reality of the hole in the wall. The contractors were gone. The city inspector was gone. But the energy of violence remained hanging in the air like the smell of ozone before a lightning strike. I knew Hunter would return. He had stormed out to his car after the inspector left, screaming into his phone, likely trying to find a lawyer or a loan shark who could fix a $10,000 problem. He failed. I knew he would fail because there is no fix for stupidity when it is documented in triplicate by the city government. I heard his car tires screech against the asphalt of the driveway. The car door slammed with enough force to rattle the window panes in their frames. He was coming. I did not move. I did not stand up to greet him. I remained seated, my hands folded in my lap, my breathing steady and deep. I was the anchor. He was the storm. The front door flew open and bounced off the wall, leaving a new dent in the plaster. Hunter stood in the doorway. He looked disheveled. His hair was wild, his tie was loosened, and his eyes were bloodshot. He held the crumpled citation in his fist like a weapon. He looked around the room, his gaze darting from the hole in the wall to the orange sticker on the window and finally landing on me. "You old son of a bitch," he whispered. The whisper was more terrifying than a scream. It vibrated with a frequency of pure, unadulterated hatred. He walked into the room, kicking aside a piece of broken drywall. Gabrielle appeared in the kitchen doorway. She was holding a mug. Her hands were shaking so badly the ceramic chattered against her wedding ring. "Hunter, please," she said, her voice thin and watery. "Just calm down. We can figure this out." "Shut up," Gabrielle Hunter snapped without looking at her. He kept his eyes locked on me. "You did this, Silas. You called them. You sat there and watched them work, and you waited until the wall was open, and then you called the city. You wanted this to happen. You wanted to ruin me. I did not want to ruin you, Hunter, I said calmly. I wanted to save the house. You were cutting a structural column. If I had let you continue, the second floor would be in the basement by dinner time. I saved your life. I do not need you to save my life, he roared. He threw the crumpled citation at me. It bounced off my chest and landed on the floor. I need you to die. I need you to stop existing. You are a cancer, Silas. You are a leech sucking the life out of my marriage and my future. He took a step closer. He was inside my personal space now. I could smell the sour taint of fierce sweat and adrenaline on him. He was a desperate man. He needed that loan to pay off the people who were threatening to break his legs. And now, with a stop work order and a red-tagged electrical panel, no bank appraiser would touch this property. I had effectively frozen his assets. I had trapped him. You think you are so smart? Hunter said, his voice shaking. You think because you built this place you own it. But you do not own anything, old man. You are a guest, and guests can be removed. He lunged. It was not a punch. It was a shove. A violent two-handed push aimed directly at my chest. I saw it coming. My reflexes were slower than they were 30 years ago, but my mind was faster. I could have sidestepped. I could have grabbed his wrists and used his momentum against him. I knew the mechanics of leverage, but I did not. I let him make contact. I let his hand slam into my sternum. I let the force of his desperation lift me from the chair. I allowed gravity to take over. I stumbled back. I flailed my arms dramatically, ensuring there was no ambiguity about what was happening. My foot caught the edge of the heavy oak console table that stood against the wall. It was a table Etta had loved. Solid oak. Sharp corners. I twisted my body as I fell. I needed this to look bad, but I did not want to break a hip. I aimed my shoulder and the side of my head toward the corner of the table. I hit the wood with a sickening crack. The pain was immediate and blinding. It flashed white behind my eyes. I felt the skin on my temple split. I felt the bruise blossoming deep in my shoulder muscle. I hit the floor hard and lay there. I did not move. I let the air leave my lungs in a ragged gasp. I felt the warm trickle of blood running down the side of my face. It pooled in my ear. It dripped onto the hardwood floor. Gabrielle screamed. It was a sound of pure primal horror. "Dad," she shrieked. I opened my eyes. The room was spinning slightly. I saw Gabrielle drop her mug. It shattered on the floor, shards of ceramic mixing with the plaster dust. She brought her hands to her mouth, but she did not move toward me. She stood there frozen, rooted to the spot by her fear of her husband. Hunter stood over me. His chest was heaving. He looked at his hands, then he looked at me. He looked at the blood spreading on the floor. For a second, I saw terror in his eyes. He realized he had crossed a line. He realized this was not an argument anymore. This was assault. "Get up," Hunter said, his voice trembling. "Get up, Silas. Stop faking. I barely touched you. You tripped. Tell her you tripped." I slowly pushed myself up to a sitting position. My head throbbed with the rhythm of a pile driver. I touched my temple. My hand came away red and wet. I looked at the blood on my fingers. Then I looked at Hunter. "I did not trip," I said. My voice was low and deadly calm. "You assaulted me in my own home." "No," Hunter shouted, backing away. "No. It was an accident. You lost your balance. You are old. Old people fall. Gabrielle, tell him. Tell him he fell." I looked at my daughter. She was crying now, silent tears streaming down her face. She looked at Hunter, then she looked at me. She saw the blood. She saw the violence. But she did not step forward to help me. She did not yell at him. She stayed in the kitchen doorway, paralyzed by her own weakness. "Gabrielle," I said softly, "help me up." She took a step forward, but Hunter shot her a look of warning. She stopped. She looked down at her shoes. "I cannot believe you," she whispered. But she was not talking to Hunter. She was talking to the situation. She was refusing to take a side even when her father was bleeding on the floor. That was the moment the last thread of hope snapped. I realized I was truly alone in this house. I realized that saving Gabrielle would require destroying the world she was clinging to because she would never leave it willingly. I gritted my teeth and pushed myself to my feet. The room tilted, but I locked my knees and stood straight. I pulled a handkerchief from my pocket and pressed it to my head to staunch the bleeding. "I am going to my room," I said. Hunter laughed, a nervous, hysterical sound. "Yeah, go run away. Go hide in your room. That is all you are good for. And do not think about calling the cops, Silas. It is your word against mine. and Gabrielle will back me up. Right, babe?" Gabrielle did not answer. She just sobbed. I walked past them. I walked slowly with dignity, leaving a trail of small red drops on the floor. I climbed the stairs. I felt their eyes on my back. Hunter felt powerful because I was retreating. He did not know I was not retreating. I was flanking. I entered my bedroom and closed the door. I turned the lock. Then I dragged my heavy desk chair under the doorknob. It was a primitive barricade, but effective. I went into the bathroom. I looked in the mirror. The cut was jagged just above the hairline. It would need stitches eventually, but for now, butterfly closures would work. I cleaned the wound with alcohol hissing through my teeth at the sting. I applied the bandages. I looked at my reflection. My eyes were cold. The grandfather was gone. The engineer was in control. I walked back into the bedroom and sat at my desk. I woke up my computer. My hands flew across the keyboard. I logged into the cloud server where the hidden cameras were uploading their data. I pulled up the feed from camera 2, the one in the living room corner, the one I had untaped just hours before. I rewound the timeline, 10 minutes ago. There it was. Crystal clear, high-definition video and audio. I watched Hunter storm in. I watched him scream. I heard every insult. I saw the rage in his face. And then I saw the shove. It was undeniable. He wound up. He stepped into it. He pushed with intent. And then the camera captured me hitting the table. It captured the blood. And most damning of all, it captured Hunter standing over me, screaming at me to get up, screaming that I was faking it while I bled on the floor. And it captured Gabrielle standing in the doorway doing nothing. I felt a pang of sorrow for her, but I pushed it down. This video was the key. This was the evidence Harrison needed to trigger the emergency eviction. This was the proof of elder abuse that would strip Hunter of everything. I downloaded the clip. I saved it to 3 different hard drives. I emailed a copy to Harrison's encrypted server. Then I picked up my phone. I dialed Harrison's number. "Silas," he answered on the first ring. "I have the video," I said. "He assaulted me. I am bleeding but stable." Harrison's voice turned to steel. "Are you safe right now?" "I am locked in my room," I said. "I am sending the police," Harrison said. "And I am filing the emergency restraining order. We are getting him out tonight." "No," I said. "Not tonight." Harrison paused. "Silas, he hurt you. He is dangerous. He is desperate," I corrected. "If the police come tonight, he will claim it was a domestic dispute. He will claim I fell. Gabrielle is too scared to contradict him yet. It will be messy. He might get released on bail tomorrow and come back angrier." "So what is the plan?" Harrison asked. "We wait," I said. "He thinks he won. He thinks I am cowed. He thinks the loan is his only way out. I need him to think he is safe for just a little longer. I need him to bring the appraiser to the house. I need him to try to finalize the fraud." "Silas, you are playing with fire," Harrison warned. "I am a structural engineer," Harrison. I said, looking at the video loop on my screen. "I know exactly how much heat the steel can take before it melts. Let him think he has control. Let him think he silenced me." I hung up the phone. I sat in the dark room listening to the sounds of the house. I heard Hunter and Gabrielle arguing downstairs. I heard her crying. I heard him opening a beer. He was celebrating. He thought a shove and a threat were enough to secure his kingdom. He did not know that the camera in the corner had seen everything. He did not know that his violence was now a digital file named evidence_assault_01 stored on a server that he could never touch. I touched the bandage on my head. It throbbed. Good. Let it throb. Pain is a reminder. Pain is fuel. I lay down on my bed fully dressed. I watched the door. I was ready. The physical war had started, and I had taken the first hit. But in structural engineering, we have a saying: the building that bends in the wind is the one that survives. I had bent. Now it was time to snap back. Sunday morning arrived with the heavy silence of a ceasefire that everyone knew was temporary. My head throbbed beneath the bandage, and my shoulder stiffened with a dull ache every time I moved my arm, but I dressed with my usual precision. I put on a fresh shirt, buttoning it to the neck to hide the pulse of anger beating in my throat. I sat in the kitchen drinking coffee and waiting. I knew Hunter would make a move. He was a man who operated on momentum, and right now the momentum was swinging against him. He had assaulted a senior citizen in his own home, and he knew that if I picked up the phone and called Harrison Cole, he would be in handcuffs before lunch. He needed to de-escalate. He needed to buy my silence. At 10 o'clock, Hunter walked into the kitchen. He looked like a man who had rehearsed his lines in the mirror. He was wearing a soft cashmere sweater instead of his usual aggressive business attire, trying to project a softer, more domestic image. He poured himself a coffee and leaned against the counter, keeping a respectful distance. He did not look at the bandage on my head. He looked at the floor. "Silas," he began, his voice low and modulated. "About yesterday. Things got out of hand. I lost my temper. The stress of the renovation and the market, it just got to me. I want to apologize. It was an accident, but I take responsibility for the temperature in the room." I sipped my coffee. I did not speak. I let his words hang in the air like smoke. "Gabrielle and I talked last night." Hunter continued, glancing toward the hallway where my daughter was likely listening. "We think you need a break. We think all of us need a reset. You have been looking tired, Silas. The noise, the dust, it is not good for you." He reached into his pocket and pulled out a thick, cream-colored envelope. He slid it across the granite island. It stopped right next to my hand. "I know you have friends down in Florida," Hunter said. "Retired engineers, people you used to work with. I booked you a first-class ticket to Miami. 1 week, all expenses paid, a nice hotel on the beach. You can relax, let your head heal, get some sun. By the time you come back, the messy part of the construction will be done and we can start fresh." I looked at the envelope. It was not a gift. It was a bribe. And more importantly, it was an evacuation order. He wanted me gone. He wanted the site clear. I picked up the envelope. I opened it. First class on Delta, leaving this afternoon at 4. The return ticket was for next Sunday. It must have cost him $2,000, money he did not have. Money he was likely borrowing from the very loan sharks he was trying to pay off. I looked at Hunter. His eyes were pleading, but behind the plea was a sharp, desperate calculation. He was terrified I would say no. He was terrified I would stay and watch him. "This is very generous, Hunter," I said, my voice neutral. "It is the least I can do," Hunter said quickly. "Seriously, Silas, just go. Enjoy yourself. Gabrielle thinks it is a great idea." Gabrielle walked in then. She looked like she hadn't slept. Her eyes were puffy. She saw me holding the ticket, and a look of immense relief washed over her face. "Please go, Dad," she said, coming over and hugging me gently, avoiding my injured shoulder. "It will be good for you. The ocean air. You love the ocean." I looked at my daughter. She wanted me to leave so she could stop feeling guilty about watching her husband assault me. She wanted the evidence of her cowardice removed from her sight. "All right," I said. "I will go." The tension in the room snapped like a cut wire. Hunter let out a breath that sounded like a tire deflating. Gabrielle squeezed my hand. "Thank you, Silas," Hunter said. "I will drive you to the airport. Go pack your bag." I went upstairs to my room. I pulled my old leather suitcase from the closet. I packed slowly. I put in my shirts, my trousers, my toiletries. But I also packed my laptop, my backup hard drives, and the binoculars I used for bird watching. I was not packing for a vacation. I was packing for a stakeout. I knew exactly why Hunter wanted me out of the state. The loan application I had seen on his computer required an appraisal. The bank needed to verify the value of the asset before they handed over $500,000. If the appraiser came while I was home, I would tell him the truth. I would tell him about the structural damage. I would tell him about the life estate deed that gave me residency rights. I would blow the deal. Hunter needed the house empty. He needed to walk the appraiser through quickly, show him the surface improvements, lie about the wall, and get the signature. He needed to present the illusion of a pristine, high-value asset owned solely by a young, successful couple. I zipped up my suitcase. I looked around the room. I was leaving the battlefield, but I was not retreating. I was moving to high ground. Hunter drove me to the airport in his leased BMW. He drove fast, eager to be rid of me. He made small talk about the weather in Florida, about the seafood restaurants I should try. I nodded and gave monosyllabic answers. When we pulled up to the departures terminal, Hunter jumped out and grabbed my bag. He shook my hand vigorously. "Have a great trip, Silas," he said. "Send us a postcard." I watched him get back in the car and drive away. He did not look back. He was probably already dialing the bank, telling them the coast was clear. I waited until his car disappeared into the traffic. Then I picked up my bag and walked to the taxi stand, where to the driver asked. I gave him the address of the extended stay suites located exactly 3 blocks from my house. It was a nondescript 4-story building that catered to business travelers and people in transition. It sat on a hill overlooking our subdivision. From the fourth floor facing west, you could see the roofs of the neighborhood. You could see my driveway. I checked into room 414. I paid cash. I told the clerk I was having my house fumigated and needed a quiet place to work for a few days. I entered the room. It smelled of industrial cleaner and stale coffee. I did not care. I set up my command post on the small table by the window. I set up the binoculars on a tripod. I opened my laptop and connected to the secure cloud server where my hidden cameras were streaming. I had eyes on the inside. Now I had eyes on the outside. I poured myself a glass of water and sat down to watch. The sun was beginning to set. The streetlights flickered on. My house looked peaceful from a distance. The windows glowed with warm light. It looked like the American dream, but inside I knew the termites were eating the frame. I waited. Sunday night passed without incident. Hunter and Gabrielle ordered pizza. They watched a movie. They looked relaxed for the first time in weeks. They thought the old man was sipping a mojito in Miami. They thought they had pulled it off. Monday morning came. I was up at 6 brewing coffee in the small kitchenette. I watched the driveway through the binoculars. Hunter left for work at 8, but he came back at 10. That was unusual. He was pacing in the driveway, checking his watch, looking down the street. At 10:30, a gray sedan pulled up. A man got out. He was carrying a clipboard and a laser measuring tool. He wore a cheap polyester suit and looked tired. This was the appraiser. But he did not look like a bank official. He looked like one of Hunter's friends. He looked like someone who could be bought. Hunter greeted him with a handshake that lingered too long. He slapped the man on the back. They laughed. It was the laugh of conspirators. They walked toward the house. I switched my attention to the laptop screen. I pulled up the feed from the living room camera. The video feed flickered to life. I saw Hunter open the front door. He ushered the appraiser inside. "Welcome to the castle," Hunter said, his voice booming. "Sorry about the mess in the living room. We are doing a little open concept conversion. But look at the space. Look at the potential." The appraiser looked at the hole in the wall. He looked at the orange stop work order sticker that Hunter had peeled off the window, but left sticky residue on the glass. "You got a permit for this?" the appraiser asked. Hunter waved his hand. "Paperwork is pending. It is all code compliant. My father-in-law is an engineer. He signed off on it before he left for Florida." I gritted my teeth. He was using my name. He was using my reputation to validate his fraud. The appraiser nodded. He did not ask to see the plans. He did not inspect the beam. He just wrote something on his clipboard. "All right, looks good enough for me," the appraiser said. "Market is hot. With the square footage and the location, I can get you to the number you need. 500,000, right? 550 if you can stretch it," Hunter said, winking. "I have some debts to clear. I can make 550 work," the appraiser said. "Just do not let the bank inspector come by until you patch that drywall." "I will handle it," Hunter said. They walked through the kitchen. Hunter showed off the appliances I had paid for. They walked past the camera hidden in the pantry. "Nice place," the appraiser said. "You own it free and clear, right?" 100%. Hunter lied. "My wife is on the deed, but I handle the finances. The old man lived here for a while, but we finally moved him out. He was getting senile. Hard to live with." "He is gone for good, then?" the appraiser asked. "Gone for good," Hunter said. "We sent him to a home down south. He won't be coming back." I sat in my hotel room and felt a cold smile spread across my face. He had just confessed to mortgage fraud on camera. He had just admitted to conspiring to falsify an appraisal. And he had declared me gone. I was not gone. I was 400 yards away. I was the ghost in the machine. The appraiser left 20 minutes later. He did not measure the bedrooms. He did not check the foundation. He spent 15 minutes drinking Hunter's coffee and talking about football. It was a rubber stamp job, a favor for a friend or a bribe for a stranger. Hunter walked him to his car. They shook hands again. Hunter looked triumphant. He looked like a man who had just gotten away with murder. He went back inside. I saw him on the kitchen camera. He picked up his phone. He dialed a number. Vicky said into the phone, "It is done. Appraisal is in the bag. Funds should clear by Friday. Yeah, I told you, I run this house." I closed the laptop. I put down the binoculars. I had what I needed. He had committed to the act. He had involved a third party. He had created a paper trail of deception that led straight to a federal penitentiary. I picked up my phone. I called Harrison. "The bird has landed, Harrison," I said. "The appraisal is fake. The loan is moving forward." "Excellent," Harrison said. "I will finalize the petition. When do you want to execute?" "He thinks the money clears Friday," I said. "He is going to throw a party." He is going to celebrate his victory. Let him celebrate, Harrison said. It will make the fall that much harder. Friday night then, I said. Have the sheriff ready. I hung up. I stood at the window and looked down at my house. It looked small from here. It looked fragile. Hunter thought he was the king. He did not know that the true king was just waiting for the right moment to return from exile. And when I returned, I was not bringing souvenirs from Florida. I was bringing the apocalypse. Friday night arrived with a bass-heavy rhythm that rattled the very windows I had installed to withstand hurricane-force winds. From my vantage point on the sidewalk across the street, the house looked less like a home and more like a nightclub that had lost its liquor license. Hunter was celebrating. He believed the loan funds had cleared or would clear by Monday morning. He believed the appraiser had signed off on the lies. He believed I was 1,000 miles away sipping iced tea in Florida while he dismantled my legacy. I watched as cars pulled into the driveway and onto the lawn. They were not the cars of respectable colleagues or friends. They were flashy leased vehicles with loud exhausts driven by men who wore sunglasses at night and women who looked bored and expensive. These were Hunter's people, the crypto bros, the hustle culture acolytes, the people who thought building wealth meant borrowing money you did not have to buy things you did not need. I walked up the driveway flanked by my team. To my right was Harrison Cole wearing a suit that cost more than Hunter's car, carrying a leather briefcase that contained the legal equivalent of a nuclear warhead. Behind us were 2 uniformed sheriff's deputies, tall and silent, their hands resting near their belts. We moved with a synchronized purpose. We were not guests. We were the eviction notice. Through the front window I could see Hunter. He was standing on the coffee table. He was actually standing with his shoes on the antique rosewood table Etta had refinished by hand. He was holding a bottle of champagne, spraying it over the crowd like a race car driver who had won a race he didn't even run. To the future, he shouted, his voice muffled by the glass but still audible. To the renovation. To getting the dead weight out of the house. The crowd cheered. I saw Gabrielle standing near the kitchen island. She was holding a glass, smiling that tight, fearful smile she used when she was trying to blend in. She looked thin. She looked tired. She was watching her husband destroy her inheritance, and she was clapping. Hunter jumped down from the table. He put his arm around a man I recognized from the appraisal visit, the man who had taken the bribe. They were laughing. They were clinking glasses. They were toasting to fraud. I looked at Harrison. He nodded. His face was grim. He knew what this house meant to me. He knew Etta. Seeing Hunter's shoes on her table had turned his professional detachment into something personal. "Ready, Professor?" he asked quietly. "I am ready," I said. We reached the front door. It was unlocked. Arrogance never locks the door because arrogance believes it is untouchable. I reached out and turned the handle. The door swung open. The noise hit us like a physical wall. The music was deafening, a repetitive electronic thumping that had no soul and no melody. The air smelled of cheap sparkling wine and vape smoke. The entryway was crowded with people who did not know me and did not care to know me. I stepped inside. Harrison followed, then the deputies. For a moment, no one noticed. The party raged on. I watched a young man ash his cigarette on the hardwood floor. I watched a woman spill her drink on the velvet armchair. I felt a cold fury settle in my chest. This was not just a party, it was an occupation. Then someone near the door saw the uniforms. The laughter died in their throat. They nudged the person next to them. A ripple of silence spread outward from the entryway, moving through the room like a wave. The dancing stopped. The conversations cut off. Hunter was in the center of the living room, his back to the door, refilling glasses. He noticed the sudden drop in volume. "Hey, why so quiet?" he shouted, turning around. "The party is just getting started." "Who died?" He froze. The bottle of champagne slipped from his fingers. It hit the floor and shattered, foaming over his shoes. He saw me. He saw the bandage on my head. He saw the suit. He saw the cold, hard look in my eyes that promised nothing but ruin. Then he saw the deputies. "Silas," he stammered. His voice was high and cracked. You are supposed to be in Florida." I did not answer him. I did not give him the dignity of a conversation. I walked into the room. The crowd parted for me. They moved back, pressing themselves against the walls, trying to distance themselves from whatever was about to happen. They sensed the shift in power. They smelled the authority. I walked past Gabrielle. She dropped her glass. It shattered on the floor, joining the mess her husband had made. "Dad," she whispered, I ignored her. I walked straight to the entertainment system. It was a massive, sleek console that Hunter had installed over the fireplace, covering the brickwork. The music was still blaring, filling the uncomfortable silence with its mindless rhythm. I looked at the amplifier. It was digital. It had no soul. It was just plastic and lights. I reached behind the unit. I found the master power cord. I gripped it firmly. In my mind, I saw the moment Hunter had turned off John Coltrane. I saw the disrespect in his eyes. I heard him call my culture trash. I pulled the plug. The music died instantly. The lights on the console went dark. The room was plunged into a sudden ringing silence. The only sound was the drip of champagne onto the floor and the heavy breathing of a man who knew he was caught. I turned around. I faced the room. I faced Hunter. "Enough of this trash," I said. My voice was calm, but it carried to every corner of the room. Hunter stepped forward. He tried to muster some of his usual bluster, but it was thin and fragile. "What do you think you are doing?" he demanded, his voice shaking. "You cannot just walk in here and ruin my party. This is my house. Get out! Get out before I throw you out." I laughed. It was a dry, humorless sound. "Your house," I repeated. I looked at Harrison. Harrison stepped forward. He opened his briefcase. The snap of the latches echoed like gunshots. "Mr. Hunter Vance," Harrison said, his voice projecting with the practiced cadence of a courtroom litigator. "I am Harrison Cole, attorney for Mr. Silas Mosley and the Etta Mosley Living Trust." Hunter looked at Harrison. He recognized the name. Everyone in the city knew the name. The color drained from his face, leaving him gray and sweaty. "Trust," Hunter whispered. "What trust?" Harrison pulled a document from the briefcase. It was thick and bound in blue legal paper. "The trust that owns this property," Harrison said. "The trust that grants residency privileges to beneficiaries solely on the condition of good behavior and legal compliance, privileges which are hereby revoked, effective immediately." Hunter looked at Gabrielle. "You told me the deed was in your name," he screamed at her. "You told me we owned it." Gabrielle was shaking. "I thought we did," she cried. "Dad gave it to us." "I gave you shelter, Gabrielle," I said. "I did not give you the right to destroy my home, and I certainly did not give you the right to mortgage it to pay for your husband's gambling addiction." A gasp went through the room. The guests were listening now. This was better than music. This was a public execution. Gambling Hunter said, looking around wildly. "I do not know what you are talking about. That is a lie. He is senile. He is making things up." Harrison pulled another document from the briefcase. It was the loan application, the one with the forged signature. "We have the application," Hunter Harrison said. "We have the digital logs from your computer. We have the emails to the forger. We have the affidavit from the bank confirming the signature does not match." Harrison handed the document to one of the deputies. The deputy looked at it, then looked at Hunter. "Hunter Vance," the deputy said, stepping forward. His hand moved to his belt, not for a weapon, but for the handcuffs. Hunter backed away. He bumped into the console table. He looked trapped. "No," he said. "No, this is a mistake. I can explain. It was an investment. I was going to pay it back." The deputy did not stop. He walked right up to Hunter. He spun him around. He grabbed Hunter's wrists and pulled them behind his back. The sound of the ratcheting metal cuffs was the loudest sound in the world. "You are under arrest," the deputy said. "For what?" Hunter screamed, struggling against the grip. "For trying to improve my own house." "For elder abuse," the deputy said. "For assault. We have the video of you attacking Mr. Mosley. And for bank fraud. Attempting to secure a loan with forged documents is a federal crime, son." Hunter looked at me. His eyes were wide with shock. He could not believe this was happening. He could not believe the old man in the cardigan had engineered his destruction. Gabrielle, wailing now, ran toward him. "Hunter," she screamed. "Tell them it is not true. Tell them you did not do it." Hunter looked at her. He sneered. "Shut up, Gabrielle," he spat. "You useless cow. If you had just controlled your father like I told you to, none of this would have happened." Gabrielle stopped. She looked at him as if seeing him for the first time. The mask had fallen completely. He was not a loving husband under stress. He was a monster who had used her. The deputies began to march Hunter toward the door. The guests scattered, moving out of the way, avoiding eye contact, terrified of being associated with the man in handcuffs. I watched him go. I did not smile. I did not gloat. I stood tall in the center of my living room, my feet planted on the floor I had built. As they dragged him past me, Hunter lunged, trying to get one last word in. "You are dead, Silas," he screamed. "You hear me? I will sue you. I will take everything. You will die in that shed." I looked at him. I looked at the man who had tried to erase me. "I am not the one leaving Hunter," I said. The door closed behind them. The flashing lights of the squad car washed over the living room, illuminating the dust, the spilled champagne, and the terrified faces of the remaining guests. I looked at the crowd. "The party is over," I said. "Get out of my house." They ran. They did not walk. They grabbed their purses and their coats, and they fled. Within 2 minutes, the house was empty except for me, Harrison, and Gabrielle, who was kneeling on the floor, sobbing into her hands. I looked at the mess. I looked at the hole in the wall covered by a tarp. I looked at the scratches on the floor. It would take work to fix. It would take time. But the structure was still standing. The rot had been cut out. Harrison closed his briefcase. "That went well," he said quietly. "It went exactly according to plan." I said. I looked at Gabrielle. She was broken. She was devastated. But she was free. She just did not know it yet. I walked over to the turntable. I plugged it back in. The tubes began to glow orange again, warming up. I did not put a record on yet. I just let the hum of the electricity fill the room. The house was breathing again. The occupation was over. Now the rebuilding could begin. But first, I had to deal with the rubble crying on my floor. The silence that filled the living room after I pulled the plug on the amplifier was heavy and textured. It was the kind of silence that precedes a structural failure, the groan of steel just before it shears. The guests stood frozen, their drinks halfway to their mouths, their eyes darting between me and the man standing on the coffee table. Hunter stared at me with a mixture of shock and alcohol-fueled rage. He looked at the cable in my hand, then at the dark console, and finally at my face. He did not step down. He tried to reclaim the high ground by remaining elevated, looking down at me from his perch on Edda's rosewood table. "You have lost your mind, Silas," Hunter said, his voice loud but wavering. He laughed, a short, sharp bark that echoed in the quiet room. "You really have lost it. You walk in here like you own the place, dragging cops and lawyers into my house during a private party? This is harassment. This is trespassing." He jumped down from the table, his shoes landing heavily on the hardwood floor I had sanded and stained by hand 40 years ago. He marched toward me, stopping just outside striking distance. He smelled of cheap champagne and fear. "Get out," he hissed. "Get out before I have these officers remove you for disturbing the peace." I did not move. I did not blink. I simply looked at him. I looked at the sweat beading on his forehead. I looked at the way his hands were trembling at his sides. "I am not going anywhere, Hunter," I said. Hunter turned to the crowd. He spread his arms wide, playing to an audience that was rapidly losing interest in his performance. "Can you believe this?" he shouted. "My father-in-law, we take him in. We feed him. We give him a place to live. And this is how he repays us. By trying to ruin our night. By trying to humiliate us in our own home." He turned back to me, a sneer twisting his face. "You think you have power here because you built this place, Silas? That does not mean anything. Construction workers build skyscrapers. They do not own them. You gave this house away. You signed the papers." He ran over to the sleek modern desk he had installed in the corner of the living room, a piece of furniture made of particle board and veneer that looked like it would collapse under the weight of a heavy book. He yanked open a drawer and pulled out a thick file folder. He waved it in the air like a flag. "I have the deed right here," he screamed. He pulled out a document, the paper crinkling in his grip. He thrust it toward the police officers, toward Harrison, toward anyone who would look. "Read it," he demanded. "Grant deed. From Silas Mosley to Gabrielle Vance. It is black and white. It is recorded with the county. This is my wife's house, which means it is my house, which means you are just a guest who has overstayed his welcome." He turned to Gabrielle, who was shrinking against the kitchen island, looking like she wanted the floor to open up and swallow her. "Tell them," Gabrielle, Hunter commanded. "Tell them it is our house. Tell them to leave." Gabrielle looked at me. Her eyes were filled with tears and confusion. She looked at the paper in Hunter's hand. She believed him. She believed the lie because she wanted to believe that her husband was a provider, not a predator. "Hunter, please," she whispered. "No, tell them." Hunter roared. Harrison Cole stepped forward. He moved with the fluid grace of a predator who knows the prey has nowhere to run. He did not look at the paper Hunter was waving. He did not need to. He had written it. That is a copy of the recorded abstract, Mr. Vance Harrison said, his voice calm baritone and filling the room without effort. It is a summary document. It is not the controlling instrument. Hunter froze. He looked at Harrison. Who are you? I am Harrison Cole, Harrison said. I am Mr. Mosley's attorney, and I am the administrator of the Etta Mosley Living Trust. Hunter blinked. Trust. There is no trust. It was a gift. Harrison opened his briefcase. He did not pull out a single sheet of paper. He pulled out a bound volume, thick and heavy, with a blue cover. He laid it on the coffee table right next to the scuff marks Hunter's shoes had left. When Mr. Mosley transferred the title 2 years ago, he did not transfer it to Gabrielle Vance as an individual, Harrison explained, speaking clearly so every guest in the room could hear. He transferred it into the trust. Gabrielle is a beneficiary. She has what is known as a conditional life estate. Hunter looked at the blue book. He looked like a man trying to read a map in a foreign language. What does that mean? He demanded. It means she owns it. It means she is a steward, Harrison corrected. She has the right to live here. She has the right to enjoy the property. But that right is subject to strict conditions, specifically the Asset Preservation Clause. Harrison opened the book. He pointed to a paragraph on page 12. Clause 4, Section B, Harrison read, the beneficiary shall maintain the structural integrity of the property. Any unauthorized demolition, alteration of load-bearing members, or significant damage to the estate constitutes a breach of trust. Harrison looked up. He pointed to the hole in the wall covered by a plastic tarp that was flapping slightly in the draft. You hired unlicensed contractors to sever a steel I-beam column, Harrison said. You compromised the structural stability of the second floor. That is a breach. Hunter scoffed. It is a renovation. We are improving the value. Harrison ignored him. He turned the page. Clause 4, Section C, he continued. The beneficiary shall not encumber the property with liens, mortgages, or lines of credit without the express written consent of the grantor. Hunter went pale. The blood drained from his face so fast it looked like a magic trick. He lowered the hand holding the deed. I see you understand that one, Harrison said dryly. You applied for a $500,000 home equity line of credit. You submitted the application on Tuesday. You forged Gabrielle's signature. That is a lie, Hunter stammered. I never. We have the digital logs, I spoke up. My voice was rough like gravel. I recorded your keystrokes, Hunter. I have the emails to your broker. I have the messages to the man named Vegas Vic. The room gasped. The guests were whispering now, a hive of gossip and judgment. They were looking at Hunter not as a successful host, but as a fraud. Hunter looked at Gabrielle. She was staring at him, her mouth open in horror. You forged my signature, she whispered. You tried to mortgage the house, babe. Listen, it was an investment. Hunter pleaded, his voice cracking. I was going to double the money. I was going to pay it back before anyone knew. It was for us. Harrison slammed the book shut. The sound was final. You violated the trust, Harrison said. Therefore, the beneficiary status is revoked. The property reverts to the grantor. Immediately. He looked at me. It is your house, Silas. It has always been your house. Hunter dropped the paper. It fluttered to the floor, landing in a puddle of spilled champagne. He looked at me. He looked at the hole in the wall. He looked at his wife, who was backing away from him. You tricked us, Hunter whispered. You set us up. I protected my legacy, I said. I built this house to last 100 years. You tried to tear it down in a week. You failed. Hunter's face twisted. The fear turned into aggression. He clenched his fists. He took a step toward me. You think a piece of paper is going to stop me, he snarled. I am not leaving. This is my home. I have rights. You cannot just throw me out on the street. I did not flinch. I did not step back. I looked past him to the 2 uniformed deputies standing by the door. That brings us to the second part of the evening, Harrison said. The civil matter is concluded. Now we must address the criminal matter. The deputies stepped forward. The crowd parted instantly, creating a wide corridor of shame. The lead deputy, a man with a face carved from granite, walked up to Hunter. He did not smile. He did not look amused. Hunter Vance, the deputy asked. Hunter looked at the exit. He looked at the window. He was calculating the odds of a run. He realized they were 0. Yes, Hunter said, his voice barely audible. The deputy reached for his belt. He pulled out a pair of steel handcuffs. They glinted under the chandelier light. "You are under arrest," the deputy said. "For what?" Hunter screamed. "This is a civil dispute. My lawyer will sue you. Charge 1. The deputy read from a small notebook. "Elder abuse. We have video evidence of you physically assaulting Silas Mosley on Saturday morning, resulting in bodily injury." Hunter looked at the bandage on my head. He looked at the camera in the corner, the one he had ignored. He tripped. Hunter yelled. He fell. "The video shows a deliberate shove," the deputy said calmly. "Charge 2. Bank fraud. Attempting to secure funds from a federally insured institution using falsified documents." "That is a lie," Hunter shouted. "Charge 3, the deputy continued relentlessly. "Aggravated identity theft, forging the signature of Gabrielle Vance for financial gain." The deputy grabbed Hunter's wrist. He spun him around. He slammed Hunter's chest against the wall right next to the hole he had paid to create. "You have the right to remain silent," the deputy said. The handcuffs clicked. It was a mechanical sound, precise and irreversible. Click, click. Hunter struggled. "Get off me. You are hurting me. Gabrielle, call someone. Call my dad." Gabrielle did not move. She stood by the kitchen island, clutching her stomach. She looked at her husband, the man she had defended against me for 2 years. She saw him pressed against the wall, cuffs on his wrists, screaming like a child. She saw the truth. I watched him. I watched the man who had turned off my music. I watched the man who had tried to put me in a shed. I watched the man who had called my life trash. He was not a king. He was not a financier. He was a vandal. And now he was a prisoner. The deputy pulled Hunter away from the wall. He marched him toward the door. Hunter's friends, the people who had been drinking my wine and laughing at my expense, turned their backs on him. They looked at their phones. They looked at the floor. They pretended they did not know him. As he passed me, Hunter looked up. His eyes were wet. He looked small. "Silas," he said, "please." I looked at him. I thought about mercy. I thought about the concept of grace. Then I thought about the loan application. I thought about the nursing home brochures I had found in his trash. I leaned in close. "You should have let me watch my show, Hunter," I said. The deputies dragged him out the front door. The flashing blue lights of the squad car bathed the living room in a cold, rhythmic pulse. The party was over. The house was quiet. I looked at Harrison. He nodded. "We did it," he said softly. I looked at the deed on the floor, soaking up the cheap wine. It was trash, just like Hunter had said. I looked at Gabrielle. She was sliding down the side of the kitchen island, collapsing into a pile of grief and realization. I walked over to her. I stood over her. I did not offer her a hand. Not yet. She needed to sit in the rubble for a moment. She needed to understand that the foundation she had built her marriage on was sand. "Dad," she sobbed. "I didn't know. I swear, I didn't know. I know I said. That is the problem, Gabrielle. You didn't want to know." I turned away from her. I walked to the window. I watched the police car drive away, carrying the debris of my daughter's life. The street was quiet. The neighbors were watching from behind their curtains. The structure was damaged. The walls were scarred, but the load had been removed. And for the first time in 2 years, I felt the house settle back onto its true foundation. It was time to start the repairs. Hunter was released on bail at 10 o'clock on Monday morning. His parents, a quiet couple from the suburbs who looked bewildered by their son's sudden fall from grace, had put up their own house as collateral. I watched from my car parked down the street from the county jail. Hunter walked out looking disheveled but defiant. He was not a man who learned from defeat. He was a man who doubled down. He adjusted his collar, pulled out his phone, and made a call. I could see him shouting, gesturing wildly at the air. He was already planning his counterattack. He was going to use his connections. He was going to spin the narrative. He was going to paint me as the villain, the senile old man who had manipulated the legal system to hurt his innocent son-in-law. I knew his next move. He would go to his office. He would try to rally his allies at the brokerage firm. He would try to use the company's legal resources to fight the eviction and the fraud charges. He would claim that the loan application was a misunderstanding, a paperwork error, and that I was a vindictive relative trying to sabotage his career. He needed to control the story before the truth spread. I started my car and drove toward the financial district. I had one more appointment to keep. Hunter thought his battle was with me. He did not know he was fighting a war on 2 fronts. He did not know that the ground he stood on professionally was about to liquefy. I arrived at the headquarters of Apex Realty Group 15 minutes before Hunter. The building was a glass monolith I had consulted on regarding wind shear dampening in the 90s. I knew the security protocols, I knew the service elevators, but today I walked through the front door. I went straight to the reception desk. I did not ask for Hunter. I asked for the CEO, Marcus Sterling. Marcus was a man who appreciated structural integrity in buildings and in people. We had shared many cigars over blueprints in the past. When the receptionist called up, Marcus told her to send me right up. I sat in Marcus's office sipping Earl Grey tea from a bone china cup. The view from the 45th floor was spectacular. The city spread out below us, a grid of ambition and concrete. Silas, Marcus said, leaning back in his chair. It has been too long. To what do I owe the pleasure? You usually only visit when a building is about to fall down. In a way, one is, I said. I placed a manila envelope on his desk. It contained copies of the arrest report, the forged loan application, and the affidavit from the bank. Marcus opened the envelope. He read in silence. His expression shifted from curiosity to disgust. He stopped at the name on the arrest report. Hunter Vance, Marcus said. He is one of my senior agents. He brings in good numbers. He brings in fraud, Marcus, I said. He forged my daughter's signature on a $500,000 loan application using a property he does not own as collateral. He was arrested for bank fraud and elder abuse on Friday night. Marcus looked up. Elder abuse. He assaulted me in my own living room, I said, touching the bandage on my head, because I stopped him from cutting a load-bearing beam without a permit. Marcus closed the file. He took off his glasses and rubbed the bridge of his nose. He was a businessman, but he was ethical. He knew that a brokerage built on trust could not harbor a man who forged signatures. He is on his way here right now, I said. He is going to tell you a story. He is going to say I am senile. He is going to ask for the company's legal help. Marcus put his glasses back on. He pressed the intercom button on his desk. Karen, when Mr. Vance arrives, send him directly to the boardroom. Do not let him go to his office, and call security. I want 2 officers outside the boardroom door. He looked at me. Do you want to be there, Silas? I stood up. I walked over to the window. I looked down at the street. I saw Hunter's BMW pull up to the curb. He got out smoothing his jacket, putting on his game face. He looked confident. He looked like a man who believed he could talk his way out of anything. I would not miss it for the world, I said. 10 minutes later, the boardroom door opened. Hunter walked in. He was striding with purpose, ready to launch into his pitch. He had his speech prepared. He was going to be the victim. He was going to be the hero. Marcus, I need to talk to you about a personal matter that is affecting my... Hunter began, his voice projecting confidence. Then he saw me. I was sitting at the head of the table to the right of Marcus. I was pouring another cup of tea. I looked up. I smiled. It was the same cold smile I had given him when the deputies slapped the cuffs on. Hunter stopped dead. His mouth hung open. The confidence evaporated, instantly replaced by a confusion so profound it was almost comical. Silas, he whispered. What are you doing here? How did you get in? Have a seat, Hunter, Marcus said. His voice was not friendly. It was the voice of a judge delivering a verdict. Hunter looked from Marcus to me. He tried to recalibrate. He tried to find a new angle. Marcus, listen, this man is... He is unwell, Hunter stammered, pointing a shaking finger at me. He has been harassing me. He staged a scene at my house. I am the victim here. He is trying to ruin my reputation because he is jealous of my success. Success, Marcus repeated. He picked up the file I had given him. He tossed it onto the polished mahogany table. It slid across the surface and stopped right in front of Hunter. Is this your definition of success? Hunter arrested for felony fraud, forging signatures, assaulting a senior citizen. Hunter looked at the file. He recognized the police logo. He recognized the bank letterhead. He paled. That is all a misunderstanding, Hunter said, sweat breaking out on his forehead. The charges will be dropped. My lawyer is handling it. It is a family dispute. It has nothing to do with the firm. It has everything to do with the firm. Marcus roared, standing up. He slammed his hand on the table. You are a licensed real estate agent, Hunter. You hold a fiduciary responsibility. You are entrusted with people's largest assets. And you are out there forging loan documents. You are assaulting the man who built half the buildings in this city. Hunter blinked. Built. What do you mean, you idiot? Marcus said, shaking his head. You do not even know who he is, do you? Silas Mosley is not just your father-in-law, he is a legend. He is the structural engineer who signed off on the seismic retrofit of this very building. I have known him for 20 years. If Silas says a beam is weak, I evacuate the building. And if he says a man is a fraud, I fire him. Hunter looked at me. He looked at the man he had called trash. He looked at the man he had tried to put in a shed. The realization hit him like a physical blow. He had not just fought an old man. He had fought an institution. Marcus looked at Hunter with contempt. You are fired, Hunter. Effective immediately. Security will escort you to your desk to collect your personal effects. You have 10 minutes. Fired, Hunter gasped. You cannot fire me. I am your top producer. I have closings in the pipeline. Not anymore, Marcus said. I am filing a formal complaint with the state licensing board today. I am attaching these police reports. You will lose your license, Hunter. You will never sell a doghouse in this state again. You are done. Hunter looked at me one last time. His eyes were full of hate, but also fear. The arrogance was gone. The bluster was gone. He was just a man with a mountain of debt and no way to pay it. You ruined me, he whispered. You ruined yourself, I said calmly. I just turned on the lights. Hunter turned and walked out. He did not stride. He shuffled. The security guards were waiting for him. Marcus sat back down. He sighed. I am sorry you had to go through this, Silas, he said. He seemed like a promising young man when I hired him. Stress tests reveal the flaws in the material, Marcus, I said. He cracked under the load. I finished my tea. I shook Marcus's hand. I walked out of the building. I walked out into the sunshine. I had stripped him of his home. I had stripped him of his career. I had stripped him of his lies. There was nothing left but the man himself. And I suspected that without the props, Hunter Vance was a very small man indeed. I got in my car and drove home. The house was waiting. Gabrielle was waiting. There was one last piece of debris to clear before the reconstruction could truly begin. I drove home in silence, letting the hum of the engine settle my nerves. The sun was beginning to set, casting long shadows across the neighborhood that Hunter had tried so desperately to impress. When I pulled into the driveway, the house looked different. It looked wounded. The orange sticker was still on the window. The tarp covering the hole in the living room wall flapped gently in the evening breeze. But the malignant energy was gone. The parasite had been excised. I parked the car and walked up the steps. I unlocked the front door with my key, the only key that worked now that I had recoded the digital locks remotely from the lawyer office. I walked inside. The living room was a mess of dust and spilled champagne, but it was my mess. I began to clean. I swept the glass. I mopped the floor. I moved the furniture back into place. I was reclaiming my territory 1 square foot at a time. I was just finishing with the mop when I heard a car pull up outside. It was a taxi. I watched through the window as Gabrielle got out. She looked like a ghost. Her makeup was smeared. Her clothes were rumpled, and she carried herself with the heavy slump of total defeat. She did not have her keys. She knocked on the door. It was a timid sound, a stark contrast to the way her husband used to slam through the entryway. I opened the door. I did not step aside to let her in. I stood in the frame, blocking the entrance. "Dad," she said, her voice cracking. "Thank God you are home. I need to come in. I need to lie down." I looked at her. I looked at the woman I had raised, the woman I had sent to college, the woman I had walked down the aisle. I looked for a spark of the daughter I knew, but all I saw was the wife of a fraud. "You cannot come in, Gabrielle," I said. She blinked, confused. "What do you mean? This is my house." "It is not your house," I corrected gently. "It never was. You were a beneficiary, and you violated the terms of your residency." Gabrielle broke down. She fell to her knees on the porch, sobbing uncontrollably. "Dad, please, do not do this. I have nowhere to go. Hunter is in jail. His parents will not answer my calls. I am all alone." I watched her cry. It hurt. It hurt in a place deep in my chest, a place that had not hurt since Etta died. But I knew that comforting her now would be the worst thing I could do. If I opened the door, I would be enabling the same weakness that had allowed Hunter to destroy our lives. "I did not know, Dad," she wailed, looking up at me. I was weak. I admit it. I was weak because I loved him. I just wanted him to be happy. I thought if I let him have his way, he would finally be satisfied. Is it a crime to love your husband too much? It is not a crime to love, I said. But it is a crime to stand by and watch while your husband assaults your father. It is a crime to sign papers you did not read. It is a crime to let a man tear down the walls of the house your mother built because you are too afraid to say no. She flinched. She knew I was right. She remembered the moment I hit the floor. She remembered standing in the kitchen doorway doing nothing. I can fix it, she pleaded. I will divorce him. I will testify against him. Just let me come home. I will sleep in the guest room. I will sleep in the shed if I have to. Just please, Dad, save me. I looked at her kneeling on the concrete. She was asking to be saved. She was asking for another bailout. She wanted to trade one dependency for another. She wanted to go from being Hunter's victim to being my burden. I cannot save you, Gabrielle, I said. I saved the house. I saved my dignity. But only you can save yourself, and you cannot do it here. I reached behind the door. I had packed a suitcase for her before I left for the hotel. It contained her clothes, her toiletries, and the few personal items that actually belonged to her. I slid the suitcase out onto the porch. Then I reached into my pocket. I pulled out an envelope. Inside was a cashier check I had drawn from the bank on my way home. It was for $6,000, enough for a deposit and 3 months' rent on a modest apartment in the city. I handed her the envelope. This is severance, Gabrielle, I said. This is your seed money. Use it to find an apartment. Use it to find a lawyer. Use it to find a therapist. But do not use it to bail Hunter out of jail, because if you do, I will know, and I will cut you off completely. She took the envelope, her hands shaking. You are kicking me out, she whispered. You are kicking your own daughter out on the street. I am pushing you out of the nest, I said. You are 32 years old, Gabrielle. You are not a child. You are a woman who needs to learn how to stand on her own 2 feet without a man propping you up or tearing you down. Dad, please, she cried, reaching for my hand. I pulled my hand back. I do not harbor people who tolerate violence in my home, I said. I do not live with people who try to put me in a shed. I love you, Gabrielle. I love you enough to let you hit rock bottom so you can find your own foundation. Because right now your structure is unsound. Go, I said. Gabrielle looked at me. She saw the set of my jaw. She saw the steel in my eyes. She realized that the old man she had ignored for 2 years was gone. In his place was the patriarch she had forgotten. She stood up slowly. She wiped her face. She took the handle of the suitcase. She looked at the check in her hand. Then she looked at me one last time. I hate you, she whispered. I know, I said. That is a start. At least you are feeling something real. She turned and walked down the driveway, dragging the suitcase behind her. The wheels made a hollow sound on the pavement. She walked toward the main road where she could catch a bus or hail a taxi. She looked small and lonely, but she was walking. She was moving. I watched her until she turned the corner. Then I stepped back inside and closed the door. I threw the deadbolt. The sound of the lock engaging was solid and final. I was alone. The house was quiet. The air was still. I walked into the living room. I looked at the hole in the wall. Tomorrow I would call a contractor, a real one with a license, and we would repair the damage. We would put up new drywall. We would paint it. We would make it strong again. But for tonight I was done working. I walked over to the vintage Macintosh amplifier. The tubes were glowing warm and orange, a steady heartbeat in the dim room. I picked up the vinyl record sleeve that was still sitting on the side table where I had left it days ago. John Coltrane, A Love Supreme. I took the record out. I placed it on the turntable. I lowered the needle. The saxophone cut through the silence. It was complex. It was chaotic. It was beautiful. It demanded attention. It demanded respect. I walked over to my leather armchair. I sat down. The leather creaked, welcoming me back. I picked up the remote control, the one Hunter had thrown at me. I held it in my hand, feeling the weight of it. I pointed it at the television. I pressed the power button. The screen flickered to life. I navigated to the menu. I found the documentary I had been watching, the one about the history of jazz, the one Hunter had called trash. It was paused at the exact moment he had turned it off. I pressed play. The images moved. The music swelled. The room filled with culture and history and soul. I reached for the bottle of wine I had opened for myself, a vintage Bordeaux that needed to breathe. I poured a glass. I swirled it, watching the red liquid coat the sides of the crystal. I took a sip. It was rich and complex, with notes of oak and dark fruit. It tasted like victory. I leaned back in the chair. I closed my eyes and let the music wash over me. I was alone in a big house with a hole in the wall. I had no wife. I had no son-in-law. My daughter hated me. But I was safe. I was respected, even if only by myself. And I was the king of my castle. The lion had cleared his territory. Now he could finally rest. Sitting here in the quiet glow of my amplifier, I realized that the strongest structures are not built merely with steel and concrete, but with boundaries. For years, I mistook silence for peace and enabling for love. I thought I was protecting my daughter by cushioning her fall, but I was only preventing her from learning how to stand. True dignity is not about what you built in the past. It is about refusing to let anyone, even family, treat you like debris in your own home. We teach people how to treat us. And sometimes the most loving thing you can do is let the walls crumble so the truth can finally be seen. If you believe that respect is non-negotiable, hit that like button and subscribe for more stories of justice. And tell me in the comments, have you ever had to evict a toxic family member to save your own peace? I want to hear your story.